Garden of Ash. Chapter 1. The Garden of Stone. The rain hadn't stopped for 372 days, but today was different. Today, the acid in it had increased to levels that ate through standard-issue protective clothing in under 6 minutes. Ren Kataev watched through reinforced glass as droplets carved tiny craters into the concrete courtyard of Haven Arcology 27. Even from the 19th level, she could see the steam rising as the rain dissolved years of accumulated grime. And more concerning, began to etch into the structural elements of the habitation complex. Warning klaxons had been blaring since dawn, keeping residents sealed inside while maintenance drones with specialized coatings worked frantically to apply neutralizing agents to critical support columns. Another day in paradise, she muttered, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The window was one of the few luxuries in her 12-square-meter apartment, an unexpected perk of being assigned to a corner unit when she'd transferred to Haven 27 6 months ago. The comm panel beside her door buzzed insistently. She ignored it. 3 short bursts, too long, the signature of her supervisor at the gardens. Whatever Overseer Markham wanted could wait. Today was her mandatory rest day. The 1 day per 7 cycle she was entitled to spend recovering from tending Eden's precious plants in the climate-controlled domes that sustained what remained of humanity. The panel buzzed again this time with the urgent pattern that indicated an override was imminent. With a sigh, Ren pushed away from the window. "Accept," she said, placing her palm against the scanner. The screen flickered to life, revealing the perpetually displeased face of Overseer Markham. His gray uniform was immaculate as always, the gold Eden insignia gleaming at his collar. "Botanist Kataev," he snapped without preamble, "you're needed at Garden Dome 5 immediately. Emergency protocol." Ren straightened instinctively. Emergency protocols were never drills. What's happened? Contamination event. That's all you need to know until you're inside the clean room. His gaze shifted, taking in her casual clothing with clear disapproval. "Your transport is waiting at Lift Bay 3. Be there in 10 minutes. The screen went dark before she could respond. Contamination. The word sent cold dread through her body. In a world where arable soil had become a myth, and every plant species was critically endangered, contamination wasn't just an inconvenience, it was potentially catastrophic. Ren moved quickly, stripping off her rest clothes and stepping into the sanitizing chamber built into her tiny bathroom. The purple light activated automatically, killing any potential biological material on her skin. After 30 seconds, she pulled on her work uniform, the white synth-weave coverall with the Eden Tree logo emblazoned on the back, the symbol of humanity's last hope of survival. She grabbed her personal tablet, the one possession she valued above all others, and slipped it into the special shielded pocket of her uniform. Technically, bringing personal items into the garden was prohibited, but Ren had long ago modified the tablet to avoid detection by the security scanners. The corridor outside her apartment was deserted. Most residents observing the acid rain lockdown by staying in their assigned living spaces. The usual crowding and noise of Haven 27's residential levels was absent, giving the white walkways an eerie, abandoned quality that Ren found oddly calming. She reached Lift Bay 3 with 2 minutes to spare. An armored transport waited, its engine humming quietly, the reinforced exterior designed to withstand even today's unusually caustic downpour. The door slid open as she approached. "Botanist Kataev," the driver acknowledged without turning around. "Secure yourself. We depart immediately." Ren strapped herself into the passenger seat, noting the driver's enhanced uniform, the subtle thickness that indicated additional protective layers. Not a standard transport technician then, someone from higher security clearance levels. The transport moved smoothly out of the bay and into the covered connection tunnel that linked Haven 27 to the garden domes. Through small armored windows, Ren caught glimpses of the havoc the acid rain was wreaking on the external structures. Maintenance drones worked frantically, spraying neutralizing compounds on essential infrastructure while ignoring anything deemed non-critical. Resources were too scarce to protect everything. Bad day for a contamination. The driver commented, breaking protocol with casual conversation. Ren studied them more carefully. Female, perhaps in her 40s, with the hardened physicality of military training rather than the soft precision of technical workers. Definitely not standard transport personnel. Any day is a bad day for contamination. Ren replied cautiously, "What's your clearance level?" A small smile appeared at the corner of the driver's mouth. "Higher than yours, botanist, but not as essential. I just move things and people where they're needed." The transport slowed as they approached the massive security gates separating Haven 27 from the garden complex. Here the real security began. Whatever had happened in Dome 5 was serious enough to warrant extraordinary measures evidenced by the 4 armed guards in full hazard suits who approached the vehicle. "Credentials," demanded the lead guard, her voice distorted through her helmet's external speakers. Ren pressed her hand against the scanner extended through a small opening in the transport window. A moment later, her entire work history, genetic profile, and security clearance appeared on the guard's tablet. Botanist Ren Kataev, Level 3 clearance specialist in nightshade cultivation and hybrid adaptive species. The guard read aloud, "Authorized." She stepped back, gesturing for the massive gates to open. Beyond the gates, the environment changed dramatically. The utilitarian design of Haven 27 gave way to the elegant curves and gleaming surfaces of Eden's garden facility. 12 massive domes rose from the ash-covered ground, each housing different plant species organized by family and utility. Between them, smaller research buildings and administrative centers connected by covered walkways created a complex that resembled nothing so much as a temple complex from the ancient world, humanity's new religion being the desperate cultivation of what little plant life had survived the collapse. The transport bypassed the main entrance, taking a service road that circled around to the rear of Dome 5 toxic and medicinal species, Ren's specialty. "Final stop," the driver announced as the vehicle pulled into a covered receiving bay. "They're waiting for you in containment suite." Good luck, botanist." Ren unstrapped herself and moved toward the door, pausing briefly. "You never told me your name." The driver's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "No, I didn't." The door slid open, ending the conversation. The receiving bay contained another security checkpoint, this one staffed by garden personnel in the familiar white uniforms of the scientific division. Their expressions were grim hands resting near the stunners attached to their belts. Unusual for scientific staff who typically left security matters to the dedicated protection units. "Kataev," acknowledged the senior researcher, a woman Ren recognized as Dr. Eliza Werner, the director of toxic species research. "Thank you for coming quickly." "What's happened?" Ren asked, falling into step beside Werner as they moved through the decontamination chamber and into the dome's outer ring corridor. Werner waited until the heavy doors had sealed behind them before responding. "We've had a breach in the Solanaceae section, specifically your primary research specimens." Ren stopped walking, blood turning cold. "The nightshade hybrids, all of them. Specimens 27 through 43. Werner specified the mature flowering plants. 17 plants, 17 irreplaceable specimens of Ren's work, nightshade species modified to produce enhanced medicinal compounds while requiring minimal water and light. Plants that represented 3 years of research and one of the few promising developments in Eden's pharmaceutical program." "How Ren demanded, resuming her pace with increased urgency. "The Solanaceae section has Level 3 security protocols, biometric access only." Werner's expression hardened. "That's the concerning part. Security logs show no unauthorized access. Environment controls functioned normally until 400 hours when automated systems detected toxin levels in the air inside the enclosure. By the time human personnel responded, all 17 specimens showed advanced signs of what appears to be an engineered pathogen." "Engineered." Ren repeated the implication clear. Not an accident, not a natural mutation. Someone had deliberately attacked her plants. They reached a junction in the corridor, turning toward containment suite. The most secure research space in Dome 5, reserved for the most dangerous specimens and apparently contamination events. "The Council has been notified." Werner continued, lowering her voice. "Security Director Voss is already inside with a team. This isn't just a scientific concern anymore. Kataev, it's a security breach of the highest order." The mention of the Council, Eden's governing body of 12 individuals who controlled what remained of organized human society, and Security Director Voss elevated the situation beyond Ren's worst fears. This wasn't just about her plants. Something much larger was happening. I still don't understand why you called me specifically, Ren said as they approached the final security door. I'm a botanist, not a security specialist or pathogen expert. Werner placed her hand on the scanner beside the door, then gestured for Ren to do the same. After both were verified, Werner input an additional command code. You were called, she said quietly as the massive door began to slide open. Because the pathogen doesn't match anything in our database yet, shows markers consistent with your personal research algorithms. And because an hour after the contamination was discovered, this was found in your primary workstation. The door completed its opening sequence, revealing the clean room beyond. In the center, on a sealed examination table surrounded by Eden's top security personnel, sat a small object that made Ren's breath catch. A book. A real physical book with paper pages and artifacts so rare that most living humans had never seen one outside of digital archives. And not just any book. Even from the doorway, Ren recognized the worn leather cover, the faded gold lettering, the pressed flower visible between partially open pages. Her mother's journal. The one possession Ren had been forced to surrender when she was recruited by Eden 15 years ago, supposedly destroyed as part of her decontamination process. That's impossible, she whispered. What's impossible, botanist Kataev? Came a deep voice from beside the table. Is that a book believed incinerated 15 years ago somehow appeared in a secure facility immediately following a sophisticated attack on critical research specimens. Security Director Voss straightened to his full intimidating height, his black uniform making him look like a shadow among the white-clad scientists. His cold eyes fixed on Ren with predatory focus. What's impossible is that the pathogen killing your plants carries markers from research you conducted 3 years ago, research supposedly deleted from all systems after being deemed too unstable for practical application. He gestured toward the book, and what's most impossible of all is that pressed between pages 43 and 44 of this journal is a specimen of a plant species officially extinct for over 20 years. Ren took an involuntary step forward, drawn to the book that had been her last connection to her mother. To the past. To the world before Eden and the Havens, and the desperate struggle for survival. Don't touch it, Voss warned. It's evidence in what the Council has classified as a Category 1 security breach. Potential terrorism against the Gardens. I didn't do this, Ren said, finding her voice despite the shock. That book was taken from me when I was 16. I haven't seen it since, and yet here it is, Voss replied, along with destroyed specimens and a pathogen linked to your research. So you understand, botanist Kataev, why you are not here simply as a consultant, but as the primary person of interest in this investigation. The room seemed to tilt around her as the implications became clear. She wasn't being called in to help. She was being accused. I need to see the plants, she said, trying to focus on the science rather than the accusation, and the pathogen analysis. There has to be an explanation. Werner exchanged glances with Voss, who gave a curt nod after a moment's consideration. You'll be allowed to examine the evidence, Werner said, under strict supervision. If you can provide insight that helps us understand this attack, it may work in your favor. This way, Voss instructed, gesturing toward an adjoining laboratory. And be aware, botanist Kataev, that everything you say and do is being recorded and will become part of the official investigation. Ren followed mind racing, the book, the plants, the pathogen. None of it made sense. Who would go to such elaborate lengths to frame her? And why her work was important, but hardly the most critical research in Eden's botanical program. The laboratory contained a sealed, transparent chamber where the remains of her nightshade hybrids had been placed. The plants, once vibrant with purple-black leaves and delicate white flowers, were now shriveled, their tissues turned to gray mush that bore little resemblance to living matter. Whatever had attacked them had worked with frightening efficiency. Initial analysis indicates the pathogen targets specific genetic modifications in your hybrids, explained a pathologist seated at a monitoring station. It ignores natural plant tissue, but aggressively breaks down engineered genetic sequences, specifically the sequences you introduced to enhance alkaloid production. That's extremely sophisticated, Ren noted, examining the molecular models displayed on the laboratory screens. This isn't some random fungus or bacteria. It's precision engineered to target specific genetic markers. Your genetic markers, Voss emphasized, your specific research. Ren ignored the implication, focusing on the science. Show me the full genetic sequence of the pathogen. The pathologist hesitated, looking to Voss for permission. Display it, Voss ordered after a moment. Let's see if botanist Kataev recognizes her own work. The screen filled with the complex pattern of a genetic sequence, the blueprint of the pathogen destroying her plants. Ren studied it intently, recognizing elements of her research, but also noting significant differences and additions. This incorporates some of my early work on targeted genetic modification, she admitted, but it's been extensively altered and combined with other elements I don't recognize. She pointed to a specific section of the sequence. This part here, this isn't from any research conducted in Eden. The formatting is completely different. Meaning what exactly? Werner asked. Ren took a deep breath, knowing her next words would sound impossible. Meaning, this pathogen was created using technology and methodologies that don't match Eden's research protocols. This wasn't made here. A heavy silence fell over the laboratory. The implication was clear and disturbing. If the pathogen hadn't been created within Eden's facilities, there were only two possibilities. Either there was another advanced research facility somewhere in the dying world outside something officially impossible according to Eden's leadership, or someone inside Eden was using unknown, unauthorized technology. Neither option fit the carefully controlled narrative maintained by the Council. That's a convenient theory, Voss finally said, his voice dangerously soft. One that diverts suspicion from yourself by suggesting mysterious outside forces. He moved closer, towering over Ren. Perhaps you'd like to explain how such outside forces manage to access a secure facility, target your specific research, and leave behind a book that once belonged to you. Before Ren could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the dome. 3 long pulses followed by a short one. The universal signal for a breach in the garden's outer perimeter. Voss's hand went immediately to his communicator. Report, he barked. The response came through clearly enough for everyone in the room to hear. Multiple breaches detected in domes 3, 5, and 8. Director initial assessment indicates coordinated physical penetration of the outer shells. Security teams responding, but the communication cut off abruptly. But what? Voss demanded. Respond. Only static answered him. Werner moved quickly to a monitoring station accessing the garden security feed. External cameras are offline, she reported, her professional calm cracking slightly. Internal feeds show intruders. She enlarged one video feed, displaying it on the main laboratory screen. The image showed the central chamber of Dome 3 cereal cultivation. Dark figures moved through the carefully maintained fields of wheat and rice, their features obscured by environmental suits unlike any Ren had seen in Eden. Not the sleek white protective gear of garden personnel, nor the utilitarian gray of Haven maintenance workers. These were patchwork affairs that appeared to be assembled from salvaged materials covered in pockets and improvised attachments. Those aren't Eden personnel, Ren stated the obvious. No. Voss agreed grimly. They're outsiders, scavengers from beyond the perimeter. Another impossibility. According to official records, no organized human communities existed outside Eden and its Haven arcologies. The world beyond the walls was supposedly too toxic, too depleted for human survival. Any remaining outsiders were described as isolated primitive groups, scavenging a meager existence, technologically incapable of mounting any significant operation, let alone a coordinated attack on Eden's gardens. Yet the evidence was playing out on the screen before them. The intruders moved with purpose, collecting samples from the plant beds and placing them in specialized containers. This wasn't random destruction or desperate scavenging, it was a precision operation. They're collecting specimens, Werner observed, just like someone did with my nightshade hybrids before destroying them, Ren finished. This isn't an attack. It's a theft. Voss was already moving toward the door, issuing rapid commands into his communicator. Full lockdown protocol. All security teams converge on the breached domes. Lethal force authorized. He paused at the doorway, fixing Ren with a hard stare. You stay here under guard. This doesn't exonerate you. Botanist, it may well be connected to your actions. The door sealed behind him with a decisive thud, leaving Ren with Werner the pathologist and 2 security officers who now regarded her with openly suspicious expressions. The book, Ren said, suddenly turning to Werner. I need to see it more closely. That's not possible. One of the guards responded immediately. Director Voss ordered. This could be connected to the current breach. Ren interrupted. You saw those outsiders. They're organized, equipped. What if the book was planted deliberately to focus suspicion on me while they prepared for this larger operation? Werner hesitated, clearly weighing protocol against the unusual circumstances. Let her examine it, she finally decided, but no physical contact. Observation only. The guards reluctantly led Ren back to the examination table where her mother's journal still lay within its protective field. Seeing it up close after 15 years sent a wave of emotion through her that she struggled to suppress. The worn leather cover darkened with age and handling. The barely legible title embossed in faded gold. Botanical Survey, Northern Continental Zone, 2067-2071. Can you rotate it? Ren asked. I need to see where it's open. The pathologist manipulated the controls, carefully rotating the book to reveal the pages marked by the pressed plant specimen. Ren leaned closer, studying the delicate, preserved leaves visible between the pages. Drosera filiformis, she whispered, recognizing the threadleaf sundew, a carnivorous plant officially extinct for decades. My mother found it in the Northern Territories before the collapse. The dating places this specimen collection approximately 30 years ago. The pathologist noted, predating the formation of Eden by nearly a decade. Ren's attention shifted to the handwritten notes visible on the exposed pages, her mother's handwriting precise, yet flowing the script of a scientist who had spent years documenting a world rapidly disappearing around her. A particular passage caught her eye, partially visible beneath the pressed plant. Third expedition to the Northern Sanctuary yielded unexpected results. The isolated community has maintained genetic diversity in plant specimens, thought extinct elsewhere. Their methods of cultivation in the subterranean chambers demonstrate remarkable adaptation to reduced light conditions. If their claims regarding the external environment are accurate, the Council's assessment of surface habitability may require significant revision. Northern Sanctuary Council assessments. Subterranean cultivation. Each phrase contradicted the official history Ren had been taught since childhood, that organized human societies had collapsed entirely outside Eden, that the surface world had become universally toxic and incapable of supporting complex plant life. Dr. Werner said, Ren said carefully, "Did you read these notes?" Werner frowned. The content is being analyzed separately. Our priority was determining how the book appeared in your workstation. Before Ren could respond, the entire dome shuddered, lights flickering momentarily as something impacted the outer structure. The security feed on the main screen changed, showing the dome's exterior where the acid rain had intensified, steam rising wherever droplets contacted the reinforced surface. Structural integrity at 87% and declining. An automated voice announced, "Acid concentration has exceeded design parameters, neutralizing systems operating at maximum capacity." Another impact, stronger this time. But not from the rain. On the security feed, Ren could see dark figures moving through the caustic downpour, apparently protected by their strange environmental suits. They were deliberately targeting connection points in the dome's external structure. "They're trying to breach this dome directly," one of the guards realized, raising his weapon. The laboratory door slid open, revealing 2 garden technicians in standard white uniforms. Emergency evacuation ordered. One announced, all personnel to proceed to Central Transport Hub. Immediately, Werner looked suspicious. On whose authority Director Voss ordered a lockdown? Authority override from council level. The technician replied smoothly. The integrity of multiple domes has been compromised. Priority now is personnel safety and securing of critical research materials. Ren noticed something the others hadn't yet registered, a subtle difference in the technicians' uniforms. The Eden Tree logo on their collars wasn't the standard embroidered insignia, but a metallic pin of slightly different design. As Werner continued questioning the evacuation order, Ren's gaze returned to her mother's journal, still open to those revealing pages. A decision crystallized in her mind with sudden clarity. Whatever was happening, the attack on her plants. The planted journal, the coordinated breach by supposed outsiders, it centered around information her mother had discovered decades ago. Information someone had gone to elaborate lengths to bring to her attention while simultaneously framing her for sabotage. In the confusion of alarms and argument, Ren moved. Her hand darted past the protective field, snatching the irreplaceable journal in one swift motion before anyone could react. "Stop her!" shouted one of the guards, reaching for his stunner. But the two technicians moved even faster. One threw something that exploded in a blinding flash, while the other grabbed Ren's arm, pulling her toward the door. "Come if you want answers," hissed a voice near her ear. "Your mother's work didn't die with her. Neither did the truth." In that fractional moment of decision, with alarms blaring and the dome shuddering around them, Ren clutched her mother's journal to her chest and ran with the stranger into the chaos beyond, toward answers, toward danger, and away from everything she had believed to be true about the last remnants of human civilization. Behind her, Eden's perfect garden began to burn. If you enjoyed this first chapter of Eden of Ash, please like and subscribe for Chapter 2, where Ren will discover shocking truths about the world beyond Eden's walls and the real history of the collapse. Your support keeps this story alive. Eden of Ash. Chapter 2. Fractures in the glass. The corridor outside the laboratory had descended into chaos. Emergency lights pulsed red against white walls, casting everything in a disorienting strobe as Ren ran alongside the fake technician. Alarms wailed at different pitches, signaling multiple breaches throughout the garden complex. Through it all, the acrid smell of smoke and chemical fire seeped through the supposedly sealed environment. "Who are you?" Ren demanded, clutching her mother's journal tightly against her chest as they navigated around panicked garden staff rushing in the opposite direction. "Later," the woman replied tersely. She tapped the metallic pin on her collar, the subtle difference Ren had noticed earlier, and spoke into it. "Mira. To extraction team, package secured, moving to exit point Delta. Package." The clinical term sent a chill through Ren, not a rescue then. An abduction. She slowed her pace, doubt suddenly overwhelming the impulse that had made her grab the journal and follow this stranger. The second fake technician had disappeared in the chaos, leaving Ren alone with this Mira, who clearly had an agenda beyond saving her from false accusations. Mira sensed her hesitation and turned, her expression hardening. "Your choice, botanist. Stay and explain to Director Voss why you stole evidence during an active security breach. I'm sure he'll be understanding." A distant explosion rocked the dome, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Somewhere, a section of the garden was now exposed to the acid rain. "What's happening?" Ren asked, resuming her pace beside Mira. "Who are you people? Those aren't Eden uniforms." "Perceptive," Mira replied with a hint of approval. "We're what your precious council calls outsiders. What we call ourselves is the remnant. The remnant." The word meant nothing to Ren beyond its obvious meaning, those who remained survivors. But Mira spoke it like an identity, a banner. They reached a junction where the corridor branched in three directions. Mira stopped, consulting something on her wrist device that Ren now noticed beneath the sleeve of her counterfeit uniform. Not Eden technology. It was bulkier, with exposed components and a makeshift quality that nonetheless suggested advanced functionality. "Security breach in Sector 7, an automated voice announced throughout the facility. "All personnel evacuate immediately. Atmospheric integrity compromised. This is not a drill." "Perfect timing," Mira muttered with grim satisfaction. She gestured toward the leftmost corridor. "This way. Our extraction point is through the propagation chambers." Ren followed, questions multiplying with each step. The propagation chambers held Eden's most precious resource, viable seeds and plant embryos maintained in cryogenic storage. Thousands of species preserved from extinction. The genetic library that might one day restore Earth's devastated ecosystems. If that was the remnant's target. "You're stealing seeds," she realized aloud. That's what this is about. The attack on my plants was a distraction. Mira shot her a sideways glance as they ran. Your plants weren't a distraction, botanist. They were a message, one your mother would have understood immediately. The mention of her mother again connected somehow to the nightshades, to the journal, to whatever the remnant was. Before Ren could demand clarification, they burst through a set of double doors into Propagation Chamber 3, one of Eden's most secure facilities. The scene inside stopped Ren cold. 3 figures in the patchwork environmental suits she'd seen on the security feeds were methodically removing cryogenic storage units from their housing in the chamber's walls. Each unit contained hundreds of seed samples in suspended animation organized by species and region of origin. A 4th figure stood at a control terminal, fingers flying across the interface as they downloaded what appeared to be the entire botanical database. You can't take those, Ren protested, shock overriding caution. Those seeds are irreplaceable. They're humanity's last hope for what? Interrupted the figure at the terminal, turning to reveal a man perhaps in his 50s, his weathered face framed by steel gray hair pulled back in a practical knot. Unlike the others, he wore no environmental suit, just practical clothing in earth tones with multiple pockets and reinforced panels. For Eden to continue its monopoly on plant life, for the Council to decide which species live or die based on their utility to the Haven system. His accent was unlike anything Ren had heard in Eden or the Havens, a lilting cadence with hard consonants that suggested a different linguistic background entirely. An impossible accent from a supposedly dead culture. Darius, Mira addressed him with clear deference. We need to move. Security countermeasures are activating throughout the complex. The man Darius nodded, turning back to complete his download. 60 seconds. He glanced at Ren appraisingly. So this is Katerina's daughter. The resemblance is striking. Katerina, her mother's name spoken by this stranger with familiar ease. Ren clutched the journal tighter. How do you know my mother? She demanded. A sad smile crossed Darius's face. She was our colleague before Eden took her research and then her life. Before they took you and made you believe their lies. He nodded toward the journal in her hands. That book contains only fragments of the truth. We can show you the rest if you're brave enough to see it. Before Ren could respond, the chamber's security system sprang to life. Metal shutters began descending over the storage units while robotic arms emerged from ceiling panels equipped with what appeared to be gas dispensers. Unauthorized access detected, announced a computerized voice. Biological countermeasures deploying in 15 seconds. All authorized personnel evacuate immediately. Time to go, Darius declared, pocketing his data device and nodding to the others. Bring what we have. It's enough. One of the suited figures approached Ren, extending a hand containing what looked like a breathing apparatus. Put this on, ordered a muffled female voice from behind the suit's faceplate. The gas won't kill you, but the experience is extremely unpleasant. Ren hesitated, torn between multiple impossible choices. Stay and face Voss's accusations of sabotage and theft. Go with these strangers who claimed to know her mother but were clearly engaged in an organized attack on Eden's most precious resource, or try to escape on her own into a garden complex in the midst of a security nightmare. The decision was made for her when emergency bulkheads began sealing throughout the chamber, the facility's automated systems attempting to contain the breach. Now or never, botanist, Mira said sharply, already fitting her own breathing apparatus. Ren took the mask, securing it over her nose and mouth just as a fine mist began spraying from the ceiling dispensers. Through the mask's filters, she detected the sweet, acrid scent of solanaceous compounds, derivatives of the very nightshade species she had been cultivating, non-lethal but disabling, causing temporary paralysis and disorientation. Darius led them toward what appeared to be a maintenance access point in the chamber's far wall. One of the suited figures attacked the access panel with a specialized tool, bypassing security measures with practiced efficiency. The panel slid open, revealing a narrow service tunnel beyond. The extraction team has secured our primary exit route, Darius informed them as they entered the tunnel. We have approximately 4 minutes to reach them before Eden Security locks down the entire complex. They moved quickly through the service tunnel, which Ren recognized as part of the infrastructure maintenance network that honeycombed the garden facility. Theoretically restricted to authorized maintenance personnel, the tunnels were rarely patrolled, considered secure by virtue of their limited access points and constant environmental monitoring. Monitoring that had clearly been compromised by the Remnant's operation. "How did you get into these tunnels?" Ren asked as they navigated a junction. "They're isolated from external access points, specifically to prevent this kind of infiltration." Mira gave a short laugh. "Eden's security isn't as impenetrable as they want you to believe, especially when you have help from the inside." "Inside?" Ren processed the implication. "You have people working within Eden. We have people everywhere." Darius replied over his shoulder. "Not everyone believes the Council's carefully constructed narrative about what happened during the collapse or what exists beyond the perimeter." The tunnel began to slope downward, taking them deeper beneath the garden complex. The pristine white surfaces of Eden's public areas gave way to utilitarian metal and concrete, the true infrastructure that supported the illusion of purity and order above. They reached a heavy mechanical door that appeared to be the entrance to some kind of maintenance bay. One of the suited figures worked on the control panel, while another kept watch behind them. "Weapon at the ready. This doesn't make sense," Ren said, trying to orient herself mentally within Eden's layout. "This section shouldn't connect to any external access point. We're at least half a kilometer from the perimeter wall. Eden has many secrets. Botanist Kataev." Darius replied, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Including how its founders really escaped the collapse." He nodded toward the door as it began to rumble open. They used tunnels, exactly like this one. Beyond the door lay not a maintenance bay as Ren had expected, but a vast underground loading dock. The space was clearly ancient, predating Eden itself, with architectural elements from the pre-collapse era still visible beneath newer construction. Massive support columns rose to a ceiling at least 20 meters high, while the floor bore markings for vehicle positioning that matched no transport design Ren had ever seen in Eden. Most shocking of all was the collection of vehicles waiting in the loading bay, a half-dozen rugged transport units that bore no resemblance to Eden's sleek, standardized designs. These were patchwork creations, like the Remnant's environmental suits, assembled from salvaged components with an emphasis on durability rather than aesthetics. Their exteriors were heavily reinforced with what appeared to be specialized shielding against environmental hazards. Including Ren realized the acid rain that had been growing increasingly caustic over the past year. "Impossible," she whispered, taking in the scene. The existence of this facility beneath Eden violated everything she had been taught about the garden complex's design and history. The presence of clearly functional vehicles designed to operate in the supposedly unsurvivable external environment contradicted the very foundation of Eden's narrative about the world beyond the perimeter. "The first truth you need to understand, Ren Kataev," Darius said, watching her reaction closely, "is that impossible is the Council's favorite lie." A distant explosion reverberated through the structure, followed by the wail of approaching security alarms. "They've breached the upper maintenance seals," reported one of the suited figures, voice distorted through their mask. "Security teams are sweeping the network. Move out," Darius ordered, guiding Ren toward the nearest transport vehicle. "All teams to assigned vehicles. Extraction Protocol Alpha." As they approached the transport, its rear compartment opened to reveal 4 more Remnant members inside these, dressed in the patchwork environmental suits, but with their faceplates retracted, revealing a mix of ages and ethnicities. They were securing what appeared to be the stolen seed storage units and data cores taken from the garden. Ren balked at the threshold of the vehicle. "I can't just leave. My whole life is here. My work. Your work was being weaponized." Mira cut in sharply. "Those nightshade hybrids you were so proud of, Eden, wasn't developing them for medicine. They were isolating the neurotoxic compounds for population control in the havens." "That's a lie," Ren protested automatically, though doubt crept in as she recalled how access to her research had become increasingly restricted over the past year. Her questions about implementation timelines met with vague answers from supervisors. "Check the journal," Darius suggested, his voice gentler now. Page 87. Your mother documented the beginning of the program before she realized what was really happening, before she tried to stop it and paid with her life. Ren's fingers moved to the journal she still clutched tightly, the urge to open it and verify his claim immediate and overwhelming. But another explosion, much closer this time, interrupted the moment. "We need to go now," insisted one of the remnant members in the transport. "Security drones are 30 seconds out." Darius extended his hand to Ren. "Last chance. Come with us and learn the truth about your mother, about Eden, about the world outside the perimeter. Or stay and face whatever punishment the council deems appropriate for a botanist who stole restricted evidence and was caught with outsiders during a security breach." Put that way, the choice seemed obvious. Yet Ren hesitated the enormity of what she was considering, leaving Eden, the only home she had known as an adult, for the toxic wasteland beyond the perimeter with people she had been taught were savage scavengers, nearly overwhelming her. What decided her ultimately was the journal in her hands. Her mother's final work, supposedly destroyed years ago, yet preserved and returned to her in this moment of crisis. If there was even a chance these people knew the truth about her mother's research about her death. Ren took Darius's hand and climbed into the transport. The vehicle's door sealed behind her with a pressurized hiss. Just as the first security drones appeared at the far end of the loading bay, their weapon systems activating with visible energy signatures. "All units initiate departure sequence," Darius ordered into a communication device as he took a seat beside the driver. "Countermeasures ready." The transport hummed to life, its engine surprisingly quiet for such a rugged vehicle, as it began to move following the others toward what appeared to be a massive sealed doorway at the far end of the loading bay. Ren strapped herself into a seat between Mira and another remnant member, a young man perhaps a few years older than herself with dark skin and a scar that ran from his left temple to jawline. "First time leaving Eden?" he asked, offering a sympathetic smile as he noted her white-knuckled grip on the restraint straps. Ren nodded, unable to find words as the reality of what she was doing fully registered. She was leaving Eden, voluntarily entering the toxic wasteland beyond the perimeter that had supposedly claimed all organized human life outside the Haven system, with strangers who had just committed what the Council would undoubtedly classify as the most significant act of terrorism since the collapse. "I'm Elias." The scarred man introduced himself. "Former Haven, 14 Resident Maintenance Division, discovered some inconsistencies in the environmental monitoring systems 3 years ago, asked too many questions." He gestured to his scar. "Security made their point before the remnant extracted me." Before Ren could respond, the massive door at the end of the loading bay began to slide open, revealing a tunnel large enough to accommodate the transport vehicle's emergency lighting activated along its length, illuminating what appeared to be an old service or evacuation route, leading away from Eden's central complex. The lead vehicles were already entering the tunnel when the security drones opened fire energy weapons, striking the reinforced exterior of Ren's transport, with enough force to rock it slightly. The armor held, but the attack triggered immediate response from the remnant forces. From ports in the transport's exterior, countermeasure devices launched toward the attacking drones, not explosives or energy weapons as Ren had expected, but compact electronic devices that attached themselves to the drones and appeared to override their control systems. The affected drones immediately ceased fire, hovering in place or flying in confused patterns. "EMP-targeted disruptors," Elias explained, noting Ren's surprise. "Disable Eden tech without destroying it. We're not murderers, despite what you've probably been taught about outsiders." Their transport entered the tunnel, the massive door beginning to close behind them as the last vehicle cleared the threshold. Through the narrowing gap, Ren caught a glimpse of Eden's security forces entering the loading bay, led by the imposing figure of Director Voss himself. Their weapons fire struck the closing door ineffectually as it sealed with a deep, resonant boom that echoed through the tunnel. "They'll use the other access points to pursue," Darius noted from the front of the transport. "We have approximately 12 minutes before they can mobilize a significant response force." The convoy of vehicles accelerated through the tunnel following what Ren now realized was an ancient roadway, a relic from before the collapse repurposed by Eden's founders and now, ironically, by those seeking to escape Eden's control. As the reality of her situation settled over her, Ren finally opened her mother's journal, turning carefully to page 87 as Darius had suggested. Her mother's familiar handwriting filled the page, the entry dated just 3 months before her reported death in a laboratory accident. April 7, 20. Project Nightshade has taken a disturbing turn. Today, I was instructed to isolate the most potent neurotoxic compounds from our hybrid species, specifically targeting human neurological function rather than pest control as originally stated. When I questioned the application, Director Mercer informed me that the Council has authorized development of atmospheric stabilization compounds for use in Haven residential sectors experiencing civil instability. The implications are unmistakable. They're developing weapons for use against their own citizens. I've expressed my ethical concerns through official channels, but I fear my objections will be ignored. Or worse, if my suspicions about previous laboratory accidents involving dissenting researchers are correct, I may have placed myself in significant danger. I've secured copies of my original research on beneficial alkaloid compounds and transmitted them through the Channel K established. If anything happens to me, the real work will continue beyond Eden's walls, where the Council's influence cannot reach. Ren must be protected. She's too young to understand what's happening, but her botanical aptitude already exceeds my own at twice her age. Eden will value that. It may keep her safe until she's old enough to recognize the truth herself. I've left markers in my work. Someday she'll see them. The entry ended there. The remaining pages in the journal blanked the record of her mother's life and work cut short, just as her actual life had been. The final entry painted a chilling picture. Her mother had discovered Eden's true purpose for the Nightshade research and had objected on ethical grounds shortly after she had died in what was officially classified as a laboratory accident. Not an accident. Murder disguised as misadventure. And now, 15 years later, Ren had been working on the very same plant family, unknowingly continuing research that had gotten her mother killed. She looked up from the journal to find Mira watching her with knowing eyes. "The markers your mother mentioned," Mira said quietly. "They were genetic sequences embedded in her original Nightshade hybrids. Sequences that would be recognizable to another botanist with her specific training. When Eden resumed the project with you as lead researcher, we needed to make sure you understood what was really happening. So you destroyed my plants." Ren concluded the pieces finally coming together and planted the journal in my workstation to warn me, to recruit me, to save you. Elias interjected. "The project was nearing completion. Once the Council had what they needed from your research, you would have become a liability just like your mother." The transport shuddered as it navigated a particularly rough section of the ancient tunnel through a viewpoint in the vehicle's side. Ren could see that they were ascending now, the tunnel curving gradually upward toward what must be an exit point some distance from Eden's central complex. "Where are we going?" she asked, realizing she had no real concept of what awaited beyond Eden's protective walls. The world she had been taught was dead, a toxic wasteland incapable of supporting complex life forms, where only the most desperate human scavengers survived in primitive conditions. Yet these outsiders were clearly anything but primitive. Their technology, while different from Eden's sleek minimalism, was sophisticated and effective. Their operation had been meticulously planned and coordinated. None of it matched the official narrative about the world beyond the perimeter. "Home," Darius answered simply. "To the northern sanctuary your mother wrote about. To what remains of the truth." The tunnel ended abruptly at what appeared to be a reinforced blast door, ancient technology from before the collapse. Its massive hydraulic systems groaning as the remnant's lead vehicle transmitted activation codes. Beyond the opening door, daylight streamed in, painful in its intensity after the dimness of the tunnel even filtered through the transport's tinted viewports. As the convoy emerged from the hidden exit, Ren pressed close to the viewport, desperate for her first glimpse of the outside world. What she saw defied everything she had been taught. They had emerged in a valley surrounded by steep hillsides, the exit cleverly concealed within what appeared to be an abandoned, pre-collapse industrial facility. The valley floor was covered not with the toxic ash and barren soil she had expected, but with vegetation, not the carefully cultivated perfection of Eden's gardens, but wild adaptive plants that had reclaimed the human-disturbed landscape. Yes, there were signs of the collapse everywhere. Rusted hulks of ancient vehicles, partially collapsed, structures reclaimed by climbing vines. The unmistakable patterns of old radiation scarring on some of the larger tree trunks. But life had persisted. Adapted continued. Not as it had been before, but not eradicated as Eden's histories claimed. Impossible, she whispered for the second time that day, but now with wonder rather than disbelief. The outside world isn't what Eden told you, Elias said, watching her reaction. It's damaged, yes. Dangerous in many places, but not dead, never dead. The convoy of vehicles moved quickly through the valley, following what had once been a road but was now little more than a cleared path through the encroaching vegetation. As they traveled, Ren noticed that the plant life became more sparse and showed increasing signs of stress, discoloration, stunted growth adaptations to harsh conditions. The effects of the acid rain were visible here, but life persisted nonetheless, finding ways to survive in the altered environment. After approximately 20 minutes of travel, they began ascending a steeper, narrower path that wound up one of the valley's hillsides. At the crest, the vehicles stopped, and Darius turned to address everyone in the transport. "Atmospheric shields activating," he announced. "Chemical composition reads acid concentration at 43% above survivable threshold. Full protective gear required for any external exposure." The transport's environmental systems hummed more intensely, creating a positive pressure inside the vehicle that would prevent external air from entering if the doors were opened through the viewport. Ren could see the acid rain that had been threatening Eden now falling in earnest across the landscape beyond caustic droplets that steamed where they struck bare rock or metal, gradually eroding everything they touched. Then, as the convoy crested the hill and began descending the other side, Ren saw their destination. In the larger valley beyond, partially sheltered by the surrounding hills, stood what could only be described as a city, though unlike any city from either before or after the collapse that Ren had seen in historical archives. This was a hybrid creation. Some structures were clearly repurposed. Pre-collapse buildings, their foundations and lower levels intact, while their upper portions had been rebuilt with salvaged and new materials. Others were entirely new constructions, utilizing a combination of advanced technology and natural elements in designs that worked with rather than against the damaged environment. Most striking of all was the massive transparent dome that covered approximately 1/3 of the settlement, a smaller version of Eden's garden domes, but with visible differences in construction and function. Beneath it, Ren could see expansive agricultural areas where plants grew in orderly rows, protected from the acid rain while still receiving filtered sunlight. "Welcome to Sanctuary North," Darius said, pride evident in his voice. One of 7 surviving independent human settlements on the continent, population approximately 8,000, and home to the most comprehensive botanical research program outside Eden's walls. 8,000 people, Ren repeated, trying to process the scale of what she was seeing. "That's impossible. The council records state that no organized human communities above 500 individuals exist outside the Haven system." "The council," Mira said with undisguised contempt, "has built its power on lies. The most fundamental being that only they possess the knowledge and resources necessary for human survival in the post-collapse world." As the convoy approached the settlement's perimeter, Ren could see a sophisticated defensive system, not just physical barriers, but environmental shields that shimmered faintly as they repelled the caustic rainfall. Entry was through a series of airlocks large enough to accommodate vehicles with decontamination systems that activated automatically. As they passed through once inside the settlement's protective perimeter, the convoy made its way toward what appeared to be a central administrative area. People moved about the streets. People in practical clothing similar to what the remnant members wore without the environmental suits that had been necessary outside. Normal human life continuing in what was supposed to be an uninhabitable wasteland. The transport finally came to a stop in a covered area that functioned as a secure receiving bay. As the vehicle's engines powered down, Darius turned to Ren with an expression of grave seriousness. "What you're about to see will challenge everything you've been taught to believe about the collapse, about Eden, about the world we live in now," he warned. "Some find the truth more difficult to accept than Eden's comfortable lies." "I want to know what happened to my mother," Ren replied, clutching the journal that now connected her to both past and present. "I want to know why Eden lied, why they're really developing those nightshade compounds." Darius nodded, satisfied with her answer. "Then let me show you what your mother helped create before Eden took her from us." The real garden, the one they don't want humanity to know still exists. As the transport's door opened onto this new world, Ren stepped out, clutching 15 years of questions and a lifetime of cultivated lies, ready at last to discover what truly grew in the ash of the old world. 10. While Ren took her first steps into Sanctuary North, Director Voss stood in Eden's compromised loading bay, surveying the aftermath of the Remnant's audacious raid. Security teams worked methodically to assess the damage and secure the facility, but Voss's attention was focused on the ancient tunnel through which the intruders had escaped, a tunnel whose existence had been classified at the highest levels of Council security. "Report," he demanded as a senior security officer approached. "Multiple breaches in domes, a 3, 5, and 8, Director." The officer replied. "Preliminary inventory indicates theft of 17 cryogenic seed storage units containing approximately 4,000 unique genetic samples. Also confirmed missing are 3 botanical database cores and 14 mature plant specimens. And the Kataev woman. Security footage confirms she left voluntarily with the intruders. She was seen taking her mother's journal from evidence containment just before departing." Voss's expression hardened, though he had clearly expected this information. "Prepare a full report for the Council classification level Omega Y. Want all references to the tunnel system and underground facility redacted from general security briefings." "Yes, Director." The officer hesitated before continuing. "Sir, there's something else. The intruder's technology, our analysts are saying it shows significant advancement beyond what should be possible for outsider groups. Some of the components appear to be of recent manufacture, not just salvaged pre-collapse tech." This caught Voss's full attention. Remnant manufacturing capability was assessed at primitive levels in the last intelligence briefing. "Yes, sir. Either that assessment was flawed or..." The officer left the implication hanging. "Or they have resources and capabilities we don't know about," Voss finished. "Which means our containment strategy has failed." He gazed once more at the massive tunnel entrance, now resealed, but representing a catastrophic breach in Eden's security, both physical and informational. The Remnant hadn't just stolen irreplaceable botanical specimens. They had taken something potentially more dangerous, a scientist who could understand them and who now had access to her mother's classified research. "Activate Protocol Scorched Earth." Voss ordered, his voice cold with finality. "Full surveillance mobilization on all known or suspected Remnant activity, and inform the Special Operations Division that I am authorizing a silence team with maximum deployment resources." The officer paled slightly at this last instruction. "A silence team, sir. The collateral damage estimations for such an operation outside the perimeter are acceptable given the nature of the threat," Voss interrupted. "The Council has contingency plans for exactly this scenario. They will be implemented without delay or hesitation." "Yes, Director." The officer saluted and departed to relay the orders. Alone now, Voss removed a small communication device from a hidden pocket, a secure direct link to the Council chambers. After entering a complex authorization code, he spoke 3 words that would set in motion events that had been planned for decades. "Sanctuary is compromised." The response was immediate and equally brief. "Proceed as authorized." Voss returned the device to its hiding place and turned away from the tunnel, his face set in grim determination. The carefully constructed narrative that had maintained order for generations was now at risk. The illusion of Eden as humanity's last hope, the only viable path for survival in a ruined world, had been punctured. What would follow would not be mere security operations, but the desperate defense of a system whose power rested entirely on control of information. Information that Ren Kataev now carried beyond Eden's walls. If you enjoyed this chapter of Eden of Ash, please like and subscribe for Chapter 3, where Ren will discover the stunning truth about Earth's supposed devastation and face the reality of what Eden has been hiding for generations. Your support keeps this story alive. Eden of Ash. Chapter 3. Seeds of Truth. The air in Sanctuary North smelled different. That was Ren's first coherent thought as she stepped from the transport into what appeared to be a receiving bay, similar to the one they had departed from beneath Eden. But while Eden's air was sterile, meticulously filtered and standardized, This air carried a complex mixture of scents, mechanical elements like lubricants and fuel, yes, but also organic components. Unfamiliar to her Eden-conditioned senses, living smells, real smells, unfiltered and unstandardized. Atmospheric adaptation can take time, Darius commented, noticing her deep inhalation. Our environmental controls are focused on removing toxins rather than sterilizing the air completely. Most newcomers find the sensory adjustment challenging. Ren nodded, still clutching her mother's journal as she took in her surroundings. The receiving bay bustled with activity as remnant members unloaded the stolen seed containers and other materials from Eden. Their movements were practiced and efficient, suggesting this was far from their first such operation, the seeds. She said, watching, as a particularly valuable unit containing rare cereal grain varieties was carefully transferred to a specialized transport cart. What are you planning to do with them? Preserve them, Darius replied simply. Study them. Propagate those that can be adapted to current environmental conditions. Return others to their native habitats where possible. Native habitats, but the ecological collapse was significant but not absolute. He interrupted gently. Eden's narrative of complete global devastation served its founders' purposes, but reality is more complex. Different regions experienced varying levels of impact. Some ecosystems have proven remarkably resilient, especially when given assistance in their recovery. He gestured for her to follow him toward a large elevator at the far end of the receiving bay. Mira and Elias joined them, while the other remnant members continued their work with the recovered materials. You should know, Darius continued as they entered the elevator, that bringing you here represents a significant security risk for Sanctuary. Not everyone agreed with the decision. Yet here I am, Ren noted. Why? Because your mother's work matters, Mira answered before Darius could respond. And because Eden is accelerating its haven control protocols, we need someone who understands the nightshade derivatives they're developing. The elevator began descending contrary to Ren's expectation. She had assumed they would be heading upward into the main settlement she had glimpsed during their approach. Where are we going? She asked. To the real heart of Sanctuary, Elias explained, the part that would interest you most as a botanist. The elevator continued its descent for nearly a minute before slowing to a stop. When the doors opened, Ren found herself staring at something that defied all her expectations and training. A vast underground chamber stretched before her, at least 100 meters across and nearly as high, carved from the living rock of the hillside and reinforced with modern engineering. The space was filled with light, not the harsh artificial illumination of Eden's facilities, but something softer and more natural delivered via an ingenious system of reflective tubes that appeared to channel sunlight from the surface. And everywhere in meticulously organized sections grew plants, not just the carefully selected utility species that Eden maintained for food and medicine, but an extraordinary diversity of plant life. Some familiar from Eden's botanical archives, others Ren had never seen outside of historical records, ferns with fronds in impossible colors, flowering plants whose blossoms shifted hue as they tracked the movement of the channeled sunlight. Trees, actual trees, growing in a spiraling pattern that maximized their access to light while creating a natural ascending pathway through the chamber. Impossible, Ren whispered the word, becoming a refrain in this day of shattered certainties. The underchamber. Darius introduced the space with evident pride. Sanctuary North's primary botanical preservation facility, started by the original settlement founders 38 years ago. And significantly expanded 15 years ago based on your mother's research. My mother helped create this, Ren asked, stepping forward to examine the nearest plant bed, a collection of medicinal herbs arranged according to a classification system similar to but distinct from Eden's standard taxonomy. She didn't just help, came a new voice from behind a particularly lush growth of what appeared to be genetically modified bamboo. Ren Kataev saved this entire facility from collapse. The speaker emerged, an elderly woman who moved with the careful precision of someone conserving limited energy. Despite her age, Her eyes were sharp and evaluative as they fixed on Ren. She wore practical clothing similar to what the other remnant members favored, but with numerous adaptations to accommodate a botanist's needs, specialized pockets for tools, reinforced panels to protect against plant toxins, gloves that appeared to be made from a synth-weave material Ren had never seen before. Dr. Eleanor Zhao, Darius introduced her with clear respect. Sanctuaries chief botanical officer and one of the original settlement founders. She worked closely with your mother during her time here. Dr. Zhao approached slowly, her gaze never leaving Ren's face. The resemblance is remarkable, she said softly, though you have your father's eyes. The mention of her father, a man Ren barely remembered who had supposedly died in a Haven accident when she was 4, startled her. Eden had provided few details about him beyond his name and basic genetic profile. You knew my father too, she asked. Johann was our hydrological engineer, Dr. Zhao confirmed. Brilliant man, designed most of the water reclamation and purification systems that still sustain Sanctuary today. Her expression darkened. His accident was Eden's first warning to your mother. One she unfortunately didn't fully comprehend until it was too late. The casual confirmation that both her parents had been murdered by Eden, information delivered as if it were established fact rather than shocking revelation, left Ren momentarily speechless. Her entire understanding of her family history, already fractured by the journal's revelations, now collapsed completely. I think perhaps we're overwhelming our guest, Darius suggested, noting Ren's expression. She's had a rather eventful day already. Dr. Zhao nodded. Of course, forgive an old woman's lack of tact, my dear. When you've survived as many years as I have in this broken world, you develop a certain directness. She gestured toward a path that wound through the central part of the underchamber. Come, I've prepared a space for you. We can speak more after you've had time to rest and process. As they followed Dr. Zhao through the underground garden, Ren found her scientific training asserting itself despite her emotional turmoil. She began cataloging the plant species they passed, noting adaptations and variations that suggested specialized breeding programs had been operating here for decades. Many species showed characteristics optimized for the reduced and filtered sunlight of the underground environment, while others displayed resistance mechanisms to toxins consistent with post-collapse environmental contamination. Most significantly, she recognized numerous plants that were classified as extinct in Eden's botanical archives, species supposedly lost during the ecological devastation that followed the collapse. Yet here they grew, perhaps not in their original form, but alive and evolving rather than preserved as mere genetic samples in Eden's cryogenic vault. How many species do you maintain here? Ren asked, professional curiosity temporarily overriding her personal shock. Currently just over 4,000 in active cultivation, Dr. Zhao replied, with another 11,000 preserved as seeds or tissue samples, far fewer than what Eden maintains, of course, but arguably more diverse in adaptation potential. And all without Eden's resources or technology. Ren noted, unable to keep the amazement from her voice. Dr. Zhao smiled slightly. We have different technological approaches, not lesser ones. Eden chose a path of isolation and controlled environment. We chose adaptation and resilience. She gestured to a particularly vibrant section where plants grew in a complex polyculture arrangement. These species have been selectively bred for 30 generations to thrive in higher acid soil conditions. They don't need Eden's perfectly controlled environments because they've evolved to survive the world as it actually exists now. They reached what appeared to be a residential section of the underchamber living quarters, integrated among the plant life rather than separated from it. Dr. Zhao led them to a modestly sized but comfortable space that had been carved into the chamber wall and furnished with a blend of salvaged pre-collapse items and locally crafted pieces. These will be your quarters for now, she explained. The bathroom facilities are communal, located 2 junctions down the main path. Meals are taken in the central commons area unless you prefer privacy, in which case you can request food be brought here. Ren entered the space, noting that despite its unfamiliar design, effort had been made to create a welcoming environment. Fresh bedding covered a sleeping platform built into an alcove, while a small work desk held what appeared to be reference materials and basic scientific equipment. A window-like opening in the wall revealed not the outside world, but a carefully cultivated section of bioluminescent fungi that provided gentle illumination. "We'll leave you to settle in," Darius said. "Someone will come for you when it's time for the evening meal. In the meantime, if you need anything, use this." He handed her a communication device unlike any Ren had seen in Eden, clearly manufactured from a combination of salvaged components and custom fabricated parts. "Just press the central button and speak," he instructed. "It's connected to our internal network. Limited range, but it covers the entire settlement." Ren accepted the device, turning it over in her hands. Every artifact from this place, from these people, represented technology that shouldn't exist according to Eden's historical archives. The cognitive dissonance was profound. "I know this is overwhelming," Dr. Zhao said gently. "When your mother first came to us, she experienced similar disorientation. Eden's conditioning runs deep, the belief that nothing sustainable could exist beyond their walls. Why did Eden lie?" Ren asked the fundamental question that had been building since she first glimpsed the world outside. If communities like Sanctuary survived, why pretend the entire outside world was dead? The three remnant members exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "Rest first." Darius finally responded. "That question has a complex answer, one better addressed when you're not exhausted from today's events." They left her alone, then the door sliding closed behind them. Not locked. Ren noted she was not a prisoner here, at least not overtly, though given the security she had witnessed and the settlement's clearly justified paranoia regarding Eden, she doubted she could leave without permission, even if she wanted to. Alone for the first time since the chaotic events in the garden. Ren sank onto the sleeping platform, her mother's journal still clutched in her hands. The reality of what she had done fleeing Eden, the only home she had known as an adult for this impossible settlement of supposed outsiders, hit her with physical force. She was a fugitive now. Eden would classify her as a collaborator in the Remnant's attack, perhaps even label her a traitor. There would be no going back. She opened the journal again, seeking some anchor point in the familiar handwriting of a mother she had lost too young. Flipping past the entries she had already read, she continued through her mother's documentation of the Nightshade research, noting with growing unease the parallels to her own work. 15 years later, on page 112, an entry caught her attention. June 12, 2087. Found confirmation of my worst fears today. Accessed restricted files in the Pharmaceutical Development Database with Ease Help Project. Nightshade's true purpose is not atmospheric stabilization, as they claimed, but behavioral modification on a population scale. The Council is developing these compounds to suppress civil unrest in the Havens through targeted neurological adjustment, essentially chemical pacification of anyone who questions Eden's authority. Worse, this is just one component of a larger initiative called Harvest. I couldn't access the complete files, but what I found suggests systematic suppression of information about the outside world, coupled with active measures to ensure no viable communities can flourish beyond Eden's control. Eden wasn't created to save humanity, as we were told. It was designed to control it. Ren paused in her reading, the implications staggering. If her mother's assessment was correct, Eden's entire founding narrative, the last bastion of organized human civilization preserving knowledge and resources for eventual restoration of a devastated world, was a calculated fiction designed to justify absolute control. She continued reading, moving quickly through increasingly agitated entries as her mother documented her growing understanding of Eden's true nature and purpose. The final entry, dated just 2 days before her reported death, was particularly chilling. July 8, 2087. I've made arrangements with Eleanor to extract critical research and botanical samples. The specimens I've developed with resilience to acid soil conditions must be preserved outside Eden's walls, away from the Council's reach. They represent a path to true environmental restoration rather than perpetual controlled scarcity. Jay has secured transport through the old maintenance tunnels. We leave tomorrow night. I've told Ren we're going on a special research expedition. She's too young to understand the true nature of our departure. Eden is the only home she's known, but I cannot leave her here. Not now that I understand what the Council plans for the next generation of children born within the Havens. If anything happens to me, E knows what to do. The backup data is hidden where only she would think to look, and I've left markers in my work that Ren will recognize when she's old enough to understand if Eden allows her to develop her botanical aptitude, as I believe they will. They never could resist exploiting talent, even from those they consider threats. This will be my final entry in this journal. Whatever comes next will be written in the new world we build outside Eden's walls, or not written at all." The entry ended there. Whatever plans her mother had made for their escape from Eden 15 years ago had clearly failed. Instead of fleeing to sanctuary with both her parents, Ren had grown up as an Eden ward, her extraordinary botanical talents cultivated for the very purposes her mother had fought against. And now, through a circular path none could have predicted, she had found her way to the exact destination her mother had intended, but 15 years too late to know either of her parents in this place that should have been their shared home. The grief hit unexpectedly, a physical pain that doubled her over. Not the distant academic sorrow for parents lost to supposed accidents long ago, but fresh, immediate anguish for what could have been for the life stolen from all of them by Eden's murderous determination to maintain control. She wept. Then truly wept for perhaps the first time since childhood. For her parents, for herself, for the years of manipulation and lies, for the bitter irony that she had unwittingly continued the very research that had led to her mother's death, potentially enabling a new generation of Eden's control mechanisms. When the tears finally subsided, Ren found herself filled with something new and unfamiliar. Rage. Cold, clarifying anger that burned away confusion and hesitation. Eden had murdered her parents, had raised her to serve the very system they died opposing, had used her talents to further develop the tools of population control her mother had tried to prevent. The fundamental question shifted in her mind no longer. Why did Eden lie? But what am I going to do about it now? She was still contemplating this question when a soft knock sounded at her door. Wiping away the lingering tears, she called out permission to enter. A young woman appeared, perhaps 16 or 17, with the characteristic features of someone born and raised outside Eden's carefully maintained genetic diversity programs. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and she carried what appeared to be a meal tray. "I'm Petra," she introduced herself. "Dr. Zhao asked me to bring you dinner. Thought you might prefer to eat privately tonight." She set the tray on the small table near the sleeping platform. "It's nothing fancy, protein from our fungal cultivation, vegetables from the upper gardens, bread from our greenhouse grains. But it's real food, not Eden's nutritionally optimized approximations." Ren thanked her, suddenly aware of her hunger despite the emotional turmoil of the day. The food did indeed look different from Eden's precisely calibrated meals, less uniform in appearance, with natural variations in color and texture that would never have passed Eden's quality control standards. "You're Katerina and Johan's daughter," Petra said, lingering by the table rather than immediately departing. "The whole settlement is talking about your arrival." "I'm not quite used to that identity yet," Ren admitted. "In Eden, I was just botanist Kataev, nightshade specialist. My parents were historical footnotes." Petra nodded in understanding. "My parents were Eden refugees too. Got out during the Haven 12 unrest about 20 years ago. They don't talk about it much, but I know it wasn't easy adjusting to life here." "How many Eden refugees are there in Sanctuary?" Ren asked, realizing this might be an opportunity to gain information from someone less guarded than the leadership. "Maybe a quarter of our population," Petra replied. "Though most came during the earlier days, during what the elders call the Great Disillusionment, about 30 years ago. Newer refugees like you are rare. Eden's security has tightened significantly in recent years." She glanced toward the door, then lowered her voice slightly. "You should know that not everyone is happy about the raid on Eden or about bringing you here. Some think it risks too much attention from Eden's security forces, that it might trigger a response we can't defend against." "Are those concerns justified?" Ren asked, unsurprised by the revelation of internal division, but curious about the actual threat assessment. Petra shrugged. "I'm just an apprentice botanist. Security matters are above my clearance level, but the settlement has survived for nearly 4 decades. Despite Eden's best efforts to ensure no independent communities exist, we must be doing something right." With that intriguing statement, she excused herself, leaving Ren alone with the meal and her thoughts. The food, when she tried it, was indeed different from Eden's offerings, more intense in flavor, with subtle complexities she had never experienced in the carefully standardized nutrition provided in the garden complex and havens. As she ate, Ren found her scientific mind reasserting itself, organizing the flood of new information into categories she could analyze more objectively. The botanical evidence was undeniable. Plant species thought extinct were thriving here, and the adaptation approaches Dr. Zhao had mentioned showed sophistication equal to or exceeding Eden's methodologies. The technological evidence, while less familiar to her expertise, similarly contradicted Eden's narrative about the primitive state of any remaining outside populations. Most compelling was the human evidence of functioning society with clear organizational structures, specialized roles, and intergenerational continuity. Not the desperate scavengers Eden had portrayed in its limited acknowledgement of outside survivors, but a community with its own values, knowledge systems, and developmental trajectory. And her mother had been part of it. Had intended for Ren to grow up here, rather than in Eden's controlled environment. The connection created an unexpected sense of belonging, despite her brief time in Sanctuary. This was the place her parents had chosen, the community they had believed in. After finishing her meal, Ren found herself drawn back to the journal, flipping through earlier entries that documented her mother's initial contact with Sanctuary and the gradual shift in her understanding of Eden's true purpose. One particular passage, written shortly after what appeared to be her mother's first visit to Sanctuary nearly 16 years ago, stood out. The most shocking revelation is not that communities survived outside Eden. Environmental modeling always suggested this possibility in certain regions. What truly disturbs me is the evidence that Eden has been actively working to destabilize these communities whenever they reach a certain development threshold. Dr. Zhao showed me documented incidents spanning 20 years, targeted biological attacks against independent agricultural projects, contamination of water sources with compounds that match Eden's chemical signatures, even direct military-style assaults against settlements that developed effective technological infrastructure. Eden isn't preserving humanity's knowledge until the world can be restored. It's ensuring that no alternate model of human civilization can emerge to challenge its authority. The implications are staggering: generations raised to believe Eden represents humanity's salvation, when in fact it may be the primary obstacle to our species' authentic recovery and adaptation. This assessment aligned with the cryptic reference to harvest in the later entry, some kind of systematic program to suppress independent human development beyond Eden's walls. If accurate, it transformed Ren's understanding not just of Eden, but of the entire post-collapse world order. Her contemplation was interrupted by another knock at the door. This time it was Elias who entered, when invited, his scarred face serious, despite his attempt at a welcoming smile. "Leadership Council is convening an emergency session," he informed her. "They've requested your presence." "Why, what's happened?" Ren asked, immediately alert to the tension in his manner. "One of our perimeter sensors detected Eden transport signatures approximately 60 kilometers from Sanctuary." His expression grew grimmer. "Multiple vehicles, heavily armed, moving in a search pattern consistent with military operations. They're looking for me." Ren concluded, the realization settling like a stone in her stomach. "For all of you, but specifically for me and the stolen seeds." "That's the current assessment," Elias confirmed. "And they're employing search methodologies that suggest they have better information about our location than they should. The Council needs to understand exactly what you might have that Eden wants badly enough to deploy this level of resources." Ren held up her mother's journal. "This, for starters. It documents Eden's systematic suppression of outside communities, something called Project Harvest. And it contains details about my mother's Nightshade research, the original work that Eden has apparently been trying to recreate using me." Elias nodded grimly. "Bring it with you. Dr. Zhao and Darius are already briefing the Council on the Eden operation, but your insights could be critical in understanding what we're facing." As they left her quarters and moved through the underchamber toward what Elias explained was the settlement's central administrative section, Ren observed increased activity throughout the facility. People moved with purpose, carrying equipment, or conferring in small groups with serious expressions. The relaxed scientific environment she had glimpsed earlier had transformed into something more akin to a military operation, preparing for potential conflict. "Has Eden attacked Sanctuary before?" she asked as they walked. "3 documented direct assaults in the settlement's history." Elias replied, "The last was 12 years ago. a coordinated strike that targeted our upper agricultural domes and water purification systems. We lost 17 people and nearly a third of that year's food production. But you survived. We adapted, he corrected. Expanded, the underchamber developed better early warning systems, improved our defensive capabilities. Eden doesn't adapt, it simply applies more resources to the same methodologies. It's both their greatest weakness and most dangerous quality. They reached a heavy door marked with the settlement's symbol, a stylized tree, growing from what appeared to be a broken foundation, its roots visible beneath the surface. The imagery's meaning was clear, life persisting despite damaged foundations, drawing strength from what lay beneath the visible world. Elias placed his hand on a recognition panel, and the door slid open to reveal a circular chamber where approximately 20 people were gathered around a central holographic display. Ren recognized Darius and Dr. Zhao among them, along with Mira and several other remnant members who had participated in the Eden operation. The holographic display showed what appeared to be a topographical map of the region surrounding Sanctuary, with moving indicators that presumably represented the detected Eden forces. Superimposed over this were defense system readouts and what looked like simulation projections for different scenarios. Conversation stopped as Ren entered, all eyes turning to assess her. The scrutiny was evaluative, but not uniformly hostile. Some faces showed curiosity, others concern, a few outright suspicion. A woman stepped forward from the group, tall and broad-shouldered, with close-cropped gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Like the others, she wore practical clothing adapted for the settlement's needs, but with subtle indicators of authority in the form of communication devices and what appeared to be a weapon concealed at her hip. "Botanist Kataev," she greeted Ren with formal precision. "I am Commander Adeyemi, head of Sanctuary North Security Council and acting settlement leader during external threat conditions." "Thank you for seeing me, Commander," Ren replied, matching the formality. "I understand Eden forces have been detected in the region." "Indeed." Commander Adeyemi gestured toward the holographic display. "A significant deployment, at least 3 heavy transports and multiple smaller scout vehicles. Their search pattern suggests specific targeting rather than general reconnaissance." "They're looking for me," Ren stated directly, "and for the materials taken from Eden's gardens. Most likely to," the commander agreed. Though the scale of the response suggests additional motivations, Eden rarely commits resources of this magnitude unless multiple strategic objectives are at stake. Dr. Zhao moved to Ren's side. "Tell them about the journal," she encouraged. "About harvest." Ren held up her mother's journal, explaining to the assembled council what she had discovered about Eden's systematic suppression of outside communities and the nightshade research Eden had forced her to continue. As she spoke, the expressions around the table grew increasingly grave. "This aligns with our historical intelligence," Commander Adeyemi noted when Ren finished. "We've long suspected Eden maintained an active program to prevent independent settlements from reaching self-sufficiency, but direct documentation has been elusive. Your mother's journal provides confirmation from within Eden's own scientific community. What I don't understand," Ren said, "is why Eden is so determined to prevent communities like Sanctuary from developing. What threat do you pose to them?" A man seated near Darius, older, with a dark complexion and features suggesting South Asian heritage, responded to this question. "The threat of alternative narrative, botanist Kataev. Eden's power rests entirely on the belief that no viable human society can exist without their controlled systems and resources, that the outside world is universally hostile to complex human civilization. Our very existence contradicts their foundational claim." "Counselor Singh is correct," Commander Adeyemi confirmed. "Eden's control of the Haven populations depends on fear of the alternative death in a toxic wasteland. If Haven residents learn that communities like Sanctuary not only survive, but thrive with greater individual freedom and adaptation potential, Eden's authority would collapse. Which brings us to our current crisis," she continued, turning back to the holographic display. "Eden's response to the garden breach suggests they believe Sanctuary's location has been compromised. Their search pattern is too focused, too deliberate for random sweeps." "How would they know where to look?" Ren asked. The transport we took followed an indirect route, and I saw no obvious landmarks that would reveal the settlement's location. The council members exchanged uneasy glances before Darius finally spoke. We suspect they may have tracking capability we haven't detected, possibly embedded in the stolen materials or in me. Ren finished, suddenly understanding their concern. You think I'm carrying some kind of tracking device? You underwent full decontamination upon arrival, Dr. Zhao assured her. Standard procedure for all new arrivals, especially from Eden. No conventional tracking technology was detected. But Eden's technological capabilities often exceed our defensive countermeasures, Commander Adeyemi added. The timing of their search operation beginning less than 6 hours after your arrival suggests information we don't yet understand. Ren's hand went involuntarily to the back of her neck where her Eden neural implant had been placed at age 16, the standard procedure for all garden personnel. The small device that tracked her vital signs and location within Eden's facilities had supposedly been deactivated by the Remnant's countermeasures during their escape. But what if it contained secondary systems backup tracking capabilities Eden had never disclosed? My neural implant, she suggested. Could it contain tracking technology that survived your countermeasures? Possible, but unlikely, responded a tech specialist from the council. Eden neural implants operate on a closed network within their facilities. They lack power reserves for long-range transmission once removed from that network. Unless they've developed new technology specifically for this contingency, Counselor Singh pointed out. Eden has always been most innovative when developing systems to maintain control. Commander Adeyemi made a decision. We'll need to scan you with our most advanced detection equipment. Botanist Kataev, possibly even surgically remove your neural implant if necessary. But first, she turned to the tech specialist. Implement Protocol Dark Chamber. Full communication blackout, maximum electromagnetic shielding. The specialist nodded and moved quickly to a control panel along the chamber wall. Within moments, a low hum filled the room as shielding systems activated, theoretically blocking any signals from entering or leaving the council chamber. If Eden does have tracking capability through your implant, the commander explained to Ren, this should temporarily prevent transmission. It buys us time to develop a more permanent solution. And if they already know Sanctuary's location? Ren asked the question everyone was clearly considering. Then we implement evacuation procedures developed precisely for this contingency. Commander Adeyemi replied with calm efficiency. Sanctuary North has survived for nearly 40 years, despite Eden's best efforts. We have contingency plans for every conceivable scenario, including complete settlement relocation if necessary. But that's a last resort, Darius added. Our first priority is understanding exactly what Eden knows and what they're truly seeking. He turned to Ren. Which brings us back to you and your mother's research. Eden expended significant resources to develop those nightshade derivatives. Now they've deployed military assets with unusual urgency following our raid. The connection seems clear. Whatever they were developing using your botanical work represents a critical strategic priority. Ren considered this assessment, thinking back through her years of research on nightshade species. The applications she had been told she was developing enhanced medicinal compounds, pest-resistant food crops had seemed straightforward scientific advancement. But if her mother's journal was correct, the true purpose had been neurological control compounds for use against Haven populations. The timing, she said slowly. A new and disturbing connection forming in her mind. The Haven unrest cycles have been increasing in frequency over the past year. Eden security forces have been deployed to 3 different Haven complexes in just the past 2 months to suppress what they termed resource distribution protests. A pattern we've noted as well, Commander Adeyemi confirmed. Our intelligence suggests growing resistance to Eden's authority throughout the Haven system. What if Ren continued the horrifying possibility, crystallizing. Eden is planning large-scale deployment of these neurological control compounds, not just for isolated unrest incidents, but as a systemic solution to growing Haven resistance. The implication hung in the air, its weight almost tangible. If Eden had developed atmospheric dispersal methods for the nightshade derivatives compounds designed to suppress questioning resistance, perhaps even independent thought itself, they could potentially pacify entire Haven populations simultaneously. That would align with historical patterns, Dr. Zhao said grimly. Eden has consistently favored technical solutions to social control problems, and the nightshade derivatives your mother documented showed particular efficacy against cognitive functions associated with critical thinking and resistance to authority. And if we've interrupted their deployment timeline by stealing your research specimens and data, Darius added, it would explain the unprecedented scale and urgency of their response. Commander Adeyemi studied the holographic display, showing Eden forces moving steadily closer to the general region of Sanctuary North. Her expression was calculating, weighing variables and contingencies with professional detachment. We need to assume worst-case scenarios, she finally declared. If Eden is indeed preparing for large-scale chemical pacification of the Havens, and if they believe we now possess both knowledge of this plan and potentially the technical capability to counter it, they won't limit themselves to recovery operations. They'll employ maximum force to eliminate the threat we represent. Scorched Earth Protocol, murmured one of the security specialists, using a term Ren recognized from Eden's historical archives, a military doctrine of destroying anything that might be useful to an enemy. Precisely, the commander agreed. Which means our response must be equally decisive. She turned to address the full council. Initiate settlement-wide security alert level 1. Begin preparation for possible evacuation of non-essential personnel and critical resources to fallback locations. As council members moved to implement these orders, Commander Adeyemi focused again on Ren Kataev. We need everything you know about these nightshade derivatives, their chemical composition, neurological effects, potential delivery mechanisms, and most importantly, any vulnerabilities or countermeasures that might exist. I'll tell you everything I know, Ren promised. But I was deliberately kept ignorant of many aspects of the program's true purpose. The most valuable information may be in my mother's research that Eden has kept classified all these years. Actually, Dr. Zhao interjected with a meaningful glance at Darius. That may not be entirely true. Darius nodded, coming to some silent agreement with the elderly botanist. There's something you should see, Ren. Something your mother left behind when she was last here before her planned escape from Eden with you and your father. Left behind. Ren echoed, confused. What are you talking about? A fail-safe, Dr. Zhao explained. Insurance against exactly the scenario we now face. Your mother was many things, but above all, she was methodical and forward-thinking. Commander Adeyemi gave a curt nod of approval. Show her. If there's any chance it contains information that could help us understand and counter what Eden is planning, we need it now. Darius led Ren from the council chamber with Dr. Zhao following more slowly, given her age. As they moved through the underchamber, Ren noticed settlement residents enacting the security protocols the commander had ordered, securing equipment, packing essential materials, preparing for potential evacuation with practiced efficiency that suggested they had drilled for exactly this situation. They reached a section of the underchamber that appeared more private and isolated than the main growing areas, a research space separated from general access by additional security measures. Dr. Zhao placed her palm on a recognition panel, then entered a complex code sequence. Your mother worked here during her visits to Sanctuary, the elderly botanist explained as the door slid open. This was her private laboratory, maintained exactly as she left it 15 years ago, in hopes that someday her daughter might continue her work. The laboratory beyond was like stepping back in time. Equipment that predated Ren's professional training sat alongside more familiar devices, all meticulously organized, according to a system she instantly recognized from her own work habits. She now realized she must have inherited from her mother, along with her botanical aptitude. At the center of the laboratory stood a specialized containment unit, a self-contained growing environment for extremely sensitive plant specimens. Unlike the more communal growing areas of the underchamber, this system appeared designed for plants requiring precise environmental controls and isolation from potential contamination. Within the unit grew a single plant. Ren recognized immediately, a nightshade hybrid. But unlike any variety she had developed in Eden, this specimen had distinctive purple-black foliage with an iridescent quality that caught the light in flowers that were not the typical white of most nightshade species, but a deep indigo with yellow centers. Atropa callista. Dr. Zhao identified the plant. Your mother's final creation before she was killed. A hybrid nightshade species engineered specifically to produce compounds that counteract the neurological control agents Eden was developing. Ren approached the containment unit in wonder, examining the plant with a botanist's trained eye. The genetic modifications were evident even from visual inspection, altered leaf structure to maximize alkaloid production, enhanced flowering to accelerate reproductive cycles, rootstock adaptations, suggesting resistance to varying soil conditions. She created an antidote, Ren realized, before Eden had even fully developed the control compound. Katerina could see the direction of Eden's research, Dr. Zhao confirmed. She understood the chemical pathways well enough to develop a countermeasure in advance of the final weapon. This plant produces alkaloids that bond with the same neurological receptors targeted by Eden's compounds, effectively blocking their action without causing harm to cognitive function. But this is beyond the capabilities I've seen in Eden's botanical modification programs, Ren said, studying the plant more closely. The genetic stability alone would require... Your mother was brilliant, Darius said simply, and she had access to research methodologies. Eden deliberately suppresses approaches that favor adaptation rather than control. We've maintained this specimen and its offspring for 15 years, Dr. Zhao continued. Protected it, cultivated it, prepared to propagate it widely if Eden ever deployed their control compounds. But without your mother's complete research, we've been unable to optimize production or develop delivery mechanisms that could protect Haven populations in time. That's why you brought me here. Ren concluded, the final piece clicking into place. Not just because of who my mother was, but because you need a nightshade specialist to continue her work, to help you defeat whatever Eden is planning. Yes, Dr. Zhao admitted without apology. Sanctuary needs your knowledge, your expertise. But more importantly, the people trapped in Eden's havens need the protection this plant can provide, if we can develop it correctly in time. Ren's scientific mind was already racing ahead, analyzing the plant's visible characteristics and considering propagation methods, extraction processes, potential delivery systems. This was her field of expertise. The work she had trained for her entire professional life, but now directed toward liberating minds rather than controlling them. I'll need my research notes from Eden, she said, professional focus, overriding emotional reaction. And samples of whatever Eden is developing for comparison. Without understanding the exact neurochemical pathways they're targeting, optimizing the countermeasure will be difficult. Your personal research data was recovered during the raid, Darius informed her. Along with samples of the compounds Eden was developing based on your work. Our lab technicians are already analyzing them. Then we should begin immediately. Ren decided, reaching for a lab coat hanging nearby her mother's lab coat, she realized with a jolt of connection across 15 years of separation. If Eden forces are already searching for Sanctuary, we don't have much time. As she slipped on the coat, something crinkled in the pocket. Reaching in, she discovered a folded piece of paper. Actual paper. A rarity even 15 years ago. Opening it carefully, she found a handwritten note in the familiar script of her mother's journal. For Ren, when you find your way here. If you're reading this, I failed to bring you to Sanctuary as planned. I'm so sorry, my brilliant daughter. Brilliant. Eden will have raised you in my absence, used your talents as they used mine before I understood their true purpose. But I believe in you, in your intelligence, your integrity, your connection to the living world that no amount of Eden conditioning could erase. The plant in this laboratory represents humanity's best hope against Eden's control mechanisms. Its genetics contain the key not just to counteracting neurological suppression compounds, but to adapting human physiology to the changed world beyond Eden's walls. Study it. Improve it. Share it. Remember that Eden's greatest lie is that humanity cannot adapt, cannot thrive without their controlled systems. We are more resilient than they want us to believe, more capable of growth and change, just like the plants we've both dedicated our lives to understanding. With love across time. Your mother, Ren, traced her fingers over the words, a direct message from a mother she had barely remembered until today. Not just a scientific legacy, but a personal one. Belief in her abilities, trust in her integrity, conviction that Eden's conditioning couldn't erase her essential nature. She looked up to find Dr. Zhao watching her with gentle understanding. She knew I might find my way here eventually, Ren said softly. She prepared for it even knowing she might not live to see it happen. Katerina always played the long game, Dr. Zhao replied with a sad smile. Like the perennial plants, she loved to study investing in future growth, even at the expense of immediate survival. She would be so proud of who you've become. Eden made me a weapon against exactly what my mother was fighting for, Ren corrected bitterly. I've spent years developing compounds that would have broken her heart. No, Darius interjected firmly. Eden tried to use you, but here you are standing in your mother's laboratory ready to continue her true work. That's not coincidence or luck. It's the essence of who you are, asserting itself despite their best efforts to control you. Before Ren could respond, her attention was caught by a subtle movement within the containment unit. The nightshade plant, Atropa calista. Her mother's final creation seemed to shift slightly, though no air currents moved within the sealed environment. As she watched in wonder, one of the indigo flowers began to open further, its petals extending in what almost appeared to be a deliberate response to her presence. It recognizes you, Dr. Zhao said softly. On some level, we don't fully understand. Your mother integrated genetic material from both your parents into this hybrid, a living biometric key that would respond only to their direct descendant. That's not scientifically possible. Ren objected automatically, her Eden training rejecting such an unverifiable claim. Many things Sanctuary has discovered aren't possible according to Eden's carefully limited science, Dr. Zhao replied with a knowing smile. The lines between science and impossibility blur when you remove artificial constraints on research methodology. A distant alarm sounded throughout the underchamber, cutting their conversation short. Commander Adeyemi's voice followed over the settlement-wide communication system. Attention all Sanctuary residents, Eden forces have been detected within 20 kilometers of our perimeter. Implement security protocol Echo 7 immediately. This is not a drill. Darius's expression hardened. They found us sooner than expected. We need to accelerate our timeline. Can you begin work immediately? Dr. Zhao asked Ren, all sentimentality set aside in the face of immediate threat. Ren looked at her mother's plant at the laboratory her mother had prepared for her 15 years ago. At the note still in her hand, a message and mission crossing time from mother to daughter. In that moment, her path forward crystallized with perfect clarity. Yes, she replied, already mentally cataloging the tasks required to analyze, extract, and propagate the countermeasure compounds. I'll need assistance familiar with your extraction equipment, access to my research data from Eden, and whatever analysis you've completed on Eden's control compounds. You'll have everything we can provide, Darius promised, and we'll defend this facility with everything we have while you work. As they moved quickly to implement this plan, organizing laboratory resources and summoning technical assistance, Ren felt a strange calmness descend, the focused clarity she had always experienced when engaging with complex botanical problems. This was what she had been trained for, what her natural abilities had always been directed toward. But now, for the first time, she was using those abilities in alignment with her own values, rather than Eden's agenda. Outside Sanctuary, Eden forces moved steadily closer, bringing with them the threat of destruction. But within her mother's laboratory, surrounded by the living legacy of a woman, she was only now beginning to understand. Ren Kataev prepared to continue a fight that had begun before she was old enough to comprehend it. A battle not just for survival, but for humanity's right to adapt and evolve beyond the constraints of those who would control it. The seeds of truth her mother had planted 15 years ago were finally ready to bloom. While Ren began her work in the Sanctuary laboratory, Director Voss stood in the command module of Eden's primary assault transport, studying holographic terrain maps as the convoy moved methodically through the forested hills north of the garden complex. 20 elite security operatives, the silence team he had personally selected and trained for exactly this contingency, prepared their equipment in the transport's main compartment. Signal triangulation confirms the target location, Director. reported the technical specialist manning the tracking systems approximately 17 to 3 kilometers ahead, concealed within the northwestern hillside of the valley system. Composition and defenses, Voss inquired, his voice cold and precise. Structural analysis suggests primarily subterranean installation with limited surface presence. Defensive systems include environmental shields, surveillance countermeasures, and what appear to be repurposed pre-collapse weaponry. Population estimate approximately 8,000 individuals. Voss absorbed this information without visible reaction, though internally he revised his tactical approach. 8,000 was significantly larger than intelligence estimates had suggested for any independent settlement. The sanctuary network had grown beyond Eden's projections, a failure of containment that would require explanation to the Council once this operation concluded. "And our asset?" he asked. "Confirmed within the target location." The specialist nodded. "Neural implant signal is weak, but present location approximately 200 meters below surface level. The tracking modifications performed during botanist Kataev's last medical assessment are functioning as designed, though signal degradation suggests countermeasure attempts." "Irrelevant." Voss dismissed the concern. "The implant has served its purpose in leading us to Sanctuary North. Its continued functionality is no longer critical to mission success." He turned to the Silence Team's commander, a woman whose facial features had been surgically altered to remove all distinctive characteristics, part of the psychological warfare approach Eden employed with its elite enforcement units. "Primary objective remains unchanged." He instructed her secure the botanical materials stolen from Eden with particular emphasis on the nightshade specimens and related research data. Secondary objective, retrieve botanist Kataev, if possible, eliminate if retrieval presents excessive operational risk. "And the settlement itself?" the commander inquired, her voice as devoid of emotion as her features. Voss's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Protocol scorched. Earth has been authorized at the highest level. Once primary objectives are secured, no trace of Sanctuary North is to remain, no survivors, no recoverable technology, no viable botanical specimens. The Council has determined that the continued existence of the Sanctuary Network represents an existential threat to Eden's mission. Casualties in the 8,000 range," the commander noted without inflection. "Confirmation of lethal force authorization, confirmed and documented." Voss replied, transferring the Council's authorization to the commander's secure tablet. "The official record will show that Sanctuary North was destroyed by environmental catastrophe, a particularly severe acid rain event that overwhelmed their protective systems. A regrettable loss of human life that further demonstrates the impossibility of sustainable existence outside Eden's controlled environments." The commander nodded once, accepting both the mission parameters and the official narrative that would follow. Eden's security forces were well practiced in the implementation of necessary brutality and the fabrication of plausible explanations. "Deployment in 20 minutes. She informed her team. "Atmospheric conditions favor our approach. Initial breach will target environmental shield generators, followed by systematic neutralization of defensive capabilities." As the Silence Team completed their preparations, Voss returned his attention to the terrain maps, calculating approach vectors and infiltration points with mechanical precision. The technology and resources at his disposal represented the full might of Eden's military capability, power developed over generations specifically to maintain Eden's absolute control over what remained of organized human civilization. Sanctuary had survived for decades by remaining hidden, adapting to changing conditions, developing counter-technologies that Eden had consistently underestimated, but that era of independent resistance was about to end. With it would die the dangerous idea that humanity could chart its own course of recovery and adaptation without Eden's guiding hand. And if botanist Kataev had to die alongside the community that had sheltered her, the community her parents had tried to join 15 years earlier, that was an acceptable cost to maintain the greater order Eden represented. The transport continued its relentless advance through the forested hills, bearing destruction toward the last significant threat to Eden's carefully constructed world order. If you enjoyed this chapter of Eden of Ash, please like and subscribe for updates on Chapter 4, where Ren will race against time to develop her mother's countermeasure as Eden forces launch their devastating assault on Sanctuary North. Your support keeps this story alive. Eden of Ash. Chapter 4. Roots of Resistance. Time compressed into a series of urgent actions as Ren worked in her mother's laboratory eggs. As assistants moved around her in carefully coordinated patterns as Sanctuary North prepared for Eden's assault. Outside alarms sounded constantly, but within this space, scientific focus created a strange bubble of calm amid growing chaos. Extraction sequence initialized, reported Petra, the young apprentice botanist. Primary alkaloid compounds separating as predicted. Ren studied the molecular structure displayed on the screen, familiar but with subtle differences from anything she'd worked with in Eden. Her mother's creation, Atropa callista, produced neuroprotective compounds with a complexity that both impressed and humbled her. The binding mechanism is elegant, Ren noted, highlighting a molecular section. It targets the same neuroreceptors as Eden's control compounds, but with a protective rather than suppressive action. Can we synthesize it in sufficient quantities? Asked Elias, who had joined the laboratory team. The extraction process seems time-intensive, not with standard methods, Ren acknowledged. But we can accelerate production using a modified fungal expression system. She turned to one of the assistants. Do you maintain cultures of Psilocybe syntheticus? The assistant nodded. Yes. In the mycological cultivation section. The improved strain Dr. Zhao developed 3 years ago. Perfect. We'll need at least 5 mature cultures immediately. They can be genetically modified to express the key alkaloid compounds much faster than conventional extraction methods. As the assistant left to retrieve the fungal cultures, Dr. Zhao entered the laboratory, her elderly frame moving more slowly than usual. Eden forces have established perimeter positions approximately 5 kilometers from Sanctuary. She informed them Commander Adeyemi believes they're preparing for a coordinated assault rather than immediate engagement. How long? Ren asked. 2 hours, perhaps 3 if our countermeasures slow their approach. They appear to be deploying specialized equipment, environmental manipulation technology, beyond our previous intelligence assessments. Ren processed this information against their production timeline. 2 hours would be insufficient for conventional extraction and synthesis. Even with the fungal expression system, they would need at least 4 hours to produce enough of the protective compound for Sanctuary's population. We need to buy more time, she said, and we need to prioritize. What delivery method had you envisioned for the countermeasure? Dr. Zhao moved to a secure storage unit, revealing specialized equipment that Ren recognized as atmospheric dispersion technology. Aerosolized delivery through Sanctuary's environmental circulation system. The elderly botanist explained. We've maintained this capability since your mother's time here, anticipating eventual need for settlement-wide distribution of protective agents. The assistant returned with the fungal culture's transparent containers housing purplish-blue mycelial networks growing on specialized nutrient substrates. Psilocybe syntheticus, a genetically modified descendant of naturally occurring psychoactive mushrooms redesigned for pharmaceutical applications. Begin genetic modification sequence. Ren instructed. We'll use rapid transfection protocols to introduce the Atropa callista alkaloid production genes into the fungal genome. As the team implemented these instructions, Ren turned to the analysis of Eden's control compounds recovered during the raid. The molecular structures confirmed her worst fears. Eden had perfected a neurological suppression agent derived from her nightshade research, designed specifically to inhibit cognitive functions associated with independent thought, while leaving basic operational capabilities intact. Perfect obedience without complete incapacitation. Eden's ideal solution to growing unrest in the Havens. They've solved the blood-brain barrier penetration issues, she noted with professional admiration, despite her moral revulsion. The molecular transport mechanism uses the subject's own neural pathways to facilitate delivery. Can your countermeasure block this specific pathway? Elias asked. Yes, but with a concerning complication. Ren highlighted the interaction point between Eden's compound and her mother's protective agent. The countermeasure works, but the binding process generates a secondary compound with potential neurological effects of its own. Nothing dangerous, but what? Dr. Zhao prompted when Ren hesitated. But the secondary compound appears to enhance neuroplasticity and cognitive association patterns. In simple terms, it doesn't just protect against Eden's control agent. It potentially improves cognitive function, particularly in areas related to creative problem-solving and pattern recognition. The implication hung in the air between them, not just a defense against Eden's control, but an enhancement to human cognitive capabilities. "Your mother knew," Dr. Zhao said softly. "She didn't just create a countermeasure. She designed the next step in cognitive evolution." The laboratory's communication system activated with Commander Adeyemi's voice. "All sections priority alert. Eden forces have deployed atmospheric manipulation technology. Acid rain concentration increasing beyond shielding capabilities. Environmental breach projected in 47 minutes. They're trying to burn us out before a direct assault," Elias translated. "Standard Eden protocol when dealing with entrenched resistance, environmental destabilization followed by cleanup operations." Ren made rapid calculations. "We need to modify our approach. Petra, recalibrate the fungal expression system for maximum immediate yield rather than sustained production. That will reduce overall production by approximately 60%. Petra warned, enough for perhaps a third of Sanctuary's population at most. Prioritize essential personnel and those with critical knowledge." Dr. Zhao instructed the difficult decision made with the clarity of someone who had survived previous existential threats. The brutal utilitarian calculation hung heavy in the laboratory air. Ren felt the weight of it pressing against her scientific detachment. "There must be another way," she insisted, returning to the molecular analysis with renewed intensity. Her attention caught on a detail in the interaction between Eden's control compound and her mother's protective agent, a catalytic relationship she hadn't fully appreciated in her initial assessment. "Amplification cascade," she murmured, the possibility crystallizing in her mind. "We don't need full individual dosing, we need threshold activation." "Explain," Dr. Zhao prompted. "The protective compound doesn't just block Eden's control agent. It converts it into the secondary neural enhancement compound through a catalytic reaction. One molecule of our protectant can potentially neutralize dozens of Eden's suppression molecules, converting them from weapons to benefits." She turned to the production team, modify synthesis parameters. "We're not producing for individual complete protection anymore. We're creating a catalyst that will transform Eden's own weapon against them." Understanding spread through the laboratory team. Rather than trying to protect each individual completely, they would distribute smaller doses that would catalyze a reaction with Eden's control compound itself, using the enemy's weapon as raw material for their defense. "Atmospheric distribution becomes even more effective with this approach," Elias noted. "Even minimal exposure to the catalyst would provide significant protection once Eden deploys their control agent. And anyone receiving the catalyst automatically helps protect others around them," Petra added, as the reaction products themselves become secondary catalysts. The entire structure shuddered, a deep resonant vibration that suggested significant impact against Sanctuary's outer defenses. Dust drifted from ceiling fixtures. "They've begun kinetic assault," Dr. Zhao observed grimly. "Earlier than projected, Commander Adeyemi will deploy defensive countermeasures, but it will accelerate environmental shield deterioration." "How much time do we have?" Ren asked. 30 minutes at most before outer defense breach. Dr. Zhao estimated. "Perhaps another 20 before they can penetrate to the underchamber levels. We need 45 minutes minimum for catalyst synthesis and distribution preparation." Ren calculated the gap between their timeline and Eden's assault, creating an impossible equation. "Then we buy you that time," came a new voice from the laboratory entrance. Commander Adeyemi stood there now, dressed in combat gear, assembled from a combination of pre-collapse military equipment and custom-fabricated additions. "How?" Dr. Zhao asked. "Direct engagement." The commander replied simply. "We've identified the atmospheric manipulation technology Eden is deploying. It requires relatively close proximity to maintain effectiveness, approximately 2 kilometers. If we can damage or disable those units, it will force them to resort to conventional assault approaches, delaying their advance." "That's a suicide mission," Elias objected. "Eden's perimeter forces are specifically positioned to prevent exactly that kind of counterstrike." "Not suicide, calculated sacrifice." Commander Adeyemi corrected with the calm certainty of a professional soldier. And not without precedent, Sanctuary has survived for 40 years because individuals have been willing to take necessary risks for collective survival. She turned to Ren. Is your catalyst approach viable? Will it work if you have the time to complete it? Ren met her gaze directly. Yes, the molecular dynamics are sound. With sufficient distribution through Sanctuary's environmental systems, we can establish protection that will render Eden's neurological control ineffective and potentially create enhanced resistance capabilities. Then my decision is made. Commander Adeyemi turned to Dr. Zhao. The Council has authorized Contingency Protocol Ember. You're now acting settlement leader until either my return or formal succession protocols are implemented. Understood, Dr. Zhao acknowledged. May the earth receive you kindly if you fall Adeyemi, and nurture what grows from my remains. The commander completed what was evidently a traditional exchange. She departed with her combat team moving with purposeful efficiency. They're going to die to buy us time, Ren said, the calculated nature of the sacrifice piercing her professional detachment. They're going to fight to preserve what matters, Dr. Zhao corrected gently. In a world as damaged as ours, survival has always required those willing to pay the highest price for collective continuation. Eden understands this truth, but perverts it, sacrificing the many to preserve control by the few. Sanctuary reverses that equation. Back to work, Ren instructed the laboratory team. Accelerate catalyst synthesis, optimize for maximum yield within our compressed timeline. 20 minutes later, as the first batch of catalyst entered final synthesis phase, the communication system activated with a field report from Commander Adeyemi's strike team. First atmospheric manipulation unit. Disabled, heavy resistance encountered 7 casualties, proceeding to secondary target with remaining team members. The immediate effect was noticeable even within the laboratory. The frequency and intensity of structural impacts decreased as Eden's forces adjusted to the loss of one of their primary assault tools. Prepare distribution system interface, Ren instructed Petra and 2 other assistants. Catalyst production will complete in approximately 12 minutes. Another communication came through, this one distorted by interference and weapons fire. Second target partial success. Atmospheric concentration, stabilizing remaining team, continuing to 3rd unit. First batch reaching final synthesis stage. Reported one of the laboratory technicians. Molecular stability confirmed at 94% of theoretical optimum. Sufficient. Ren decided, begin transfer to the distribution system. We'll refine subsequent batches if time permits, but this exceeds minimum viability thresholds. Dr. Zhao activated a settlement-wide communication channel. Attention all Sanctuary residents, prepare for protective catalyst distribution through environmental systems in approximately 7 minutes. Ensure all internal circulation vents are fully open and unobstructed. The laboratory shuddered again as another impact struck somewhere above. Equipment rattled on workbenches, and a minor ceiling collapse sent debris scattering across one corner of the room. Eden forces have breached the upper agricultural dome, came an update. Sanctuary defenders engaging at multiple points. Environmental shield integrity at 37% and declining. Ren made a rapid decision, balancing scientific caution against urgent necessity. Begin catalyst distribution immediately with completed batch, she ordered. Don't wait for full production. Petra and another technician activated the distribution system, which hummed to life with quiet efficiency. Indicator lights showed the catalyst being introduced into Sanctuary's environmental circulation. A final communication came through from Commander Adeyemi's strike team, a single voice strained but determined. Commander, fallen 3rd target neutralized. Eden forces full conventional assault pattern estimate, 30 minutes before underchamber breach. The strike team had succeeded in their mission at the cost of their own lives. They had purchased the time needed for catalyst distribution, the 30 minutes that might make the difference between Sanctuary survival and extinction. Dr. Zhao absorbed this news with stoic dignity. Acknowledge final report. She instructed the communications technician, implement full contingency protocol Ember. All defenders to fallback positions, protecting environmental circulation infrastructure. As the team continued their work, a realization formed in Ren's mind, a connection between disparate pieces of information. Eden doesn't know what we're doing, she said, the insight crystallizing. They expect resistance, but conventional resistance. They don't anticipate a catalyst that transforms their own control compound against them. Psychological advantage, Elias noted. They'll deploy their neurological agent expecting immediate suppression of resistance, not realizing they're enhancing our cognitive capabilities. More than psychological, Ren continued. If Eden forces themselves are exposed to their control compound after it interacts with our catalyst, they become affected by the neural enhancement effects. Dr. Zhao completed the thought, potentially disrupting their command structure and tactical decision-making. This unintended consequence created a new strategic possibility, not just protection for sanctuary residents, but active disruption of Eden's assault forces if they proceeded with their standard protocol of securing an area before deploying neurological control agents. We need to ensure catalyst distribution extends to our outer defenses, Ren decided. Maximum concentration in areas Eden forces will enter first. As the laboratory team adjusted distribution parameters, the second batch of catalyst reached completion, a larger volume with slightly refined molecular structure. Secondary synthesis complete, announced one of the technicians. Increased yield and improved catalytic efficiency confirmed. The settlement's emergency communication system activated with alerts from multiple sections. Breach in agricultural dome 2 Eden forces entering with heavy weapons. Residential section east reporting multiple penetration attempts, defenders engaging, water reclamation facility under direct assault. Defensive countermeasures activated. The reports painted a picture of coordinated attack across Sanctuary's outer perimeter. Eden forces applying pressure at multiple points simultaneously to divide defenders and create confusion. Water reclamation, Ren repeated immediately, grasping the tactical significance. They're targeting our distribution systems. They know something about our countermeasures. Or they're following standard protocols for settlement neutralization. Dr. Zhao countered. Control, critical infrastructure, first population, second data resources, third. The second batch of catalyst was now flowing through the atmospheric distribution system, increasing saturation levels throughout Sanctuary's inhabited zone. Monitoring displays showed the protective compound spreading efficiently through air circulation patterns. Central processing system reports neural protection thresholds achieved in 82% of critical zones, announced one of the laboratory technicians. Estimated full coverage in approximately 7 minutes at current distribution rates. It was working. The accelerated production and distribution strategy was establishing protective coverage throughout Sanctuary faster than Eden forces could penetrate their defenses. Now we wait, Dr. Zhao said, the simple statement encompassing the terrible uncertainty of their situation. Their countermeasure was deployed, but its effectiveness remained theoretical until actually tested against Eden's control compounds. And even if it worked perfectly, Sanctuary still faced overwhelming conventional military force. As if to emphasize this reality, another powerful impact shook the laboratory, causing more substantial structural damage than previous hits. A support beam cracked and several pieces of equipment crashed to the floor. They've breached mid-level defenses, Dr. Zhao interpreted, approaching inner sanctuary zones. We should move to the secure command center to coordinate ongoing response. Ren hesitated, looking at the remaining catalyst production still in process. We should complete final synthesis. Every additional unit of catalyst increases protection effectiveness. The automated systems can complete production without direct supervision, Dr. Zhao pointed out. And your expertise is now more valuable in strategic response planning than laboratory oversight. They moved through the underchamber's main corridors toward Sanctuary's secure command center. Ren observed Sanctuary residents implementing emergency protocols with practiced efficiency, securing essential supplies, moving vulnerable individuals to protective shelters, establishing medical treatment areas. They reached the command center to find it already functioning as the nerve center of Sanctuary's defense. In Commander Adeyemi's absence, her second-in-command, a compact, muscular woman, introduced to Ren as Major Chen had assumed tactical leadership. Status report, Dr. Zhou requested as they entered. Eden forces have penetrated to mid-levels in 3 sectors. Major Chen reported, indicating positions on a holographic map of Sanctuary. Our defenders are implementing staged withdrawal protocols, slowing their advance while minimizing casualties. Environmental circulation systems remain intact and functioning at 94% capacity despite targeted attacks. And the catalyst distribution, Ren asked. Atmospheric saturation complete throughout all inhabited zones, Chen confirmed. If your protective agent works as designed, botanist Kataev, our population has established threshold defense against neurological agents. It will work, Ren stated with confidence. The molecular dynamics are sound, and the catalyst's interaction with Eden's compound creates a self-reinforcing protection cycle. The question isn't whether it works, but whether Eden will recognize what's happening quickly enough to adjust their tactical approach. Major Chen nodded. Then we focus on preserving critical infrastructure and population centers, while allowing Eden forces to penetrate to the point where they typically deploy neurological agents. If they follow standard protocols, they'll attempt atmospheric dispersion once they believe they've secured sufficient territory. Casualties? Dr. Zhao asked. 27 confirmed, Chen replied, her professional demeanor slipping slightly. Primarily defensive teams at outer positions, and Commander Adeyemi's strike force current projections suggest. Another 30 to 40 before engagement concludes, depending on how quickly Eden recognizes the failure of their neurological agents. What about evacuation protocols? Ren asked. Evacuation routes have been compromised, Chen explained. Eden forces have specifically targeted our known exit paths, suggesting intelligence beyond what we believe they possessed. We're prioritizing in-place protection rather than evacuation. We have a priority signal incoming, announced a communications specialist. Origin verified as Elias Reed transmitting from Water Reclamation Sector 3. Put it through, Dr. Zhao authorized. Elias's voice came through with background sounds of weapons fire. Zhao, are you receiving? Eden forces are deploying what appears to be their neurological agent through captured environmental systems in the agricultural level. Effect on our defenders is not what Eden expected. The transmission paused as more intense sounds of conflict came through, then resumed. Confirmation positive the catalyst is working. The exposed defenders are reporting increased cognitive function and reaction times rather than suppression. Eden command elements appear confused by the unexpected response. We're counterattacking successfully in 3 breach zones. A wave of cautious hope spread through the command center. Their catalyst was successfully transforming Eden's weapon into an advantage for Sanctuary's defenders. Acknowledged. Major Chen responded, maintain pressure on disoriented Eden units. Priority remains protecting environmental circulation infrastructure. Ren moved to the environmental monitoring station, analyzing real-time data on catalyst distribution and interaction with Eden's deployed neurological agent. The molecular interactions were proceeding exactly as predicted, the catalyst binding with Eden's compound and transforming it. But something unexpected was occurring as well. The secondary neural enhancement effect was stronger than their models had projected, potentially creating more significant cognitive augmentation in exposed individuals than they had anticipated. The catalyst reaction is amplifying beyond expected parameters, she reported to Dr. Zhao. Neural enhancement effects approximately 27% more pronounced than laboratory models suggested. Dangerous, Dr. Zhao asked immediately. Not physiologically dangerous, Ren clarified, but potentially creating more profound cognitive alterations than we projected. Increased sensory processing, enhanced pattern recognition, possibly elevated emotional intensity as well. Our defenders are reporting unusual clarity of perception and decision-making. Major Chen confirmed, coordination between units has improved significantly, even without direct communication. Eden forces are adjusting tactics, reported a defensive coordinator. They've ceased neurological agent deployment and are switching to conventional suppression approaches, heavy weapons being brought to bear on primary defender positions. Eden had recognized that their specialized weapon was not only failing, but creating adverse effects for their operation. They were reverting to pure military force. Implement contingency protocol Phoenix, Dr. Zhao instructed Major Chen. Prioritize preservation of knowledge and critical personnel over territory or infrastructure. Chen nodded grimly and began issuing revised defensive orders. Protocol Phoenix, named for the mythical bird reborn from ashes, was Sanctuary's final stage defense strategy. focused not on preventing Eden's advance, but on ensuring the settlement's essential knowledge and key individuals survived to rebuild elsewhere. Another series of impacts struck the settlement, these more precise and damaging than previous assaults. The command center's reinforced structure absorbed the shock, but monitoring systems showed significant structural compromise in multiple sectors. Eden forces have deployed targeted breaching charges against primary support columns, reported a structural integrity specialist, attempting to collapse upper levels onto critical infrastructure. A priority communication alert sounded, this one originating from Sanctuary's outer perimeter monitoring system. The specialist routed it to the main command display, revealing imagery that momentarily silenced the entire command center. Eden's assault forces were suddenly under attack, not from Sanctuary defenders, but from what appeared to be another external force approaching from the northern ridgeline. Heavily armed vehicles of unfamiliar design moved with coordinated precision, targeting Eden's command units and atmospheric manipulation technology with devastating effectiveness. Identification. Major Chen demanded unknown, responded the monitoring specialist. Vehicles and equipment don't match any documented Eden or Haven designations. Sanctuary West, Dr. Zhao said softly. They received our emergency notification and deployed their rapid response force. I didn't think they could mobilize quickly enough to intervene. Sanctuary West. Ren repeated, processing this new information. Another independent settlement. One of 7, Dr. Zhao confirmed, each established in different regions to maximize survival probability. If any individual settlement was discovered and neutralized by Eden, communication between settlements is limited to emergency situations precisely to prevent Eden from identifying the full network. The holographic display showed the new forces engaging Eden units with remarkable effectiveness, employing weapons and tactics that suggested military capability equal or superior to Eden's elite security teams. Most surprising was their apparent immunity to Eden's neurological agents. They've developed their own countermeasures, Dr. Zhao explained, noting Ren's confusion. Different approach than ours, neural shielding rather than catalytic transformation. Sanctuary West specialized in neurological defense technologies, while we focused on botanical adaptation. Each settlement developed different areas of expertise to ensure knowledge diversity across the network. The arrival of these reinforcements dramatically altered the tactical situation. Eden's forces, already disoriented by the unexpected failure of their neurological agents, now faced a coordinated attack against their rear position. Eden command units are initiating withdrawal protocols, reported the tactical specialist. Primary assault forces redeploying to defensive positions. They're retreating. Major Chen translated, not a tactical repositioning, but a full strategic withdrawal. They've assessed the combined threat as exceeding their operational parameters. The command center erupted in cautious celebration. Eden forces were indeed executing a withdrawal, prioritizing equipment recovery over continued assault. The unexpected intervention of Sanctuary West forces had transformed a desperate defense into potential victory. Dr. Zhao established communication with the Sanctuary West commander, exchanging formal protocols of cooperation between the settlements. As coordination between Sanctuary North and West forces continued, Ren found herself drawn back to the environmental monitoring data, studying the ongoing molecular interactions between their catalyst and Eden's neurological agent. Eden's attempt to establish absolute control had instead accelerated evolution beyond their carefully maintained parameters. Their weapon of suppression had been transformed into a catalyst for advancement. Their assault on Sanctuary had revealed the existence of a coordinated resistance network they had failed to detect despite decades of surveillance. In their desperate attempt to maintain control, they had instead demonstrated its impossibility. While Ren witnessed Sanctuary's unexpected victory, Director Voss stood in the command module of Eden's primary assault transport, studying the unexpected reversal of their military advantage. Order complete withdrawal, he instructed the tactical commander. Secure atmospheric manipulation units and all portable equipment. Disable what cannot be transported. Sir, protested the commander. We still maintain superior conventional force capability. Sanctuary's defenses are compromised in multiple sectors, with a focused assault. The operation parameters have changed. Voss interrupted coldly. The emergence of additional outside forces with military capabilities matching our own represents an unacceptable strategic variable. More concerning, our neurological control agents have been compromised through unknown countermeasures. He turned to study the tactical display, showing the unexpected attack from what appeared to be another independent settlement, one whose existence contradicted Eden's intelligence assessments about the isolation of outside communities. The Council must be informed of these developments immediately. He continued, prepare full operational analysis for secure transmission once we've established safe distance from the engagement zone. And protocol scorched earth? Asked the tactical commander. The environmental saturation operation is already in deployment phase. Do we proceed? Voss considered this question carefully. The artificial acid rain front they had already initiated would continue its approach toward Sanctuary, regardless of their withdrawal. While it might not accomplish the complete destruction of the settlement's infrastructure as originally planned, it would still render large portions of the surrounding region uninhabitable, limiting Sanctuary's operational capability. Maintain environmental deployment as scheduled. He decided we may have lost this engagement, but we can still deny them sustainable territory. As the Eden forces executed their withdrawal under covering fire, Voss contemplated the broader implications of this failed operation. The existence of multiple coordinated outside settlements with military capabilities comparable to Eden's elite forces represented a fundamental challenge to the Council's authority. More disturbing still was the apparent neutralization of their neurological control compounds agents that had been developed through decades of careful research and were supposed to be undetectable until activation. Somehow, Sanctuary had not only detected these compounds, but developed countermeasures that appeared to transform them into something else entirely, which meant Eden's planned implementation of population-wide neurological control throughout the Haven system might be vulnerable to similar countermeasures if knowledge of the compound's composition spread beyond Sanctuary. Voss activated his direct communication link to the Council, bypassing standard command protocols. The situation had evolved beyond tactical consideration into strategic crisis territory. Eden's fundamental narrative of outside unviability was being challenged not just by Sanctuary North's continued existence, but by evidence of a coordinated network of settlements developing technologies Eden had failed to anticipate or counter. The world beyond the perimeter wasn't dying as they had claimed. It was evolving, adapting, advancing along paths Eden had neither predicted nor controlled, and that reality represented the gravest threat to Eden's authority since the collapse itself. But if you enjoyed this chapter of Eden of Ash, please like and subscribe for updates on Chapter 5, where Ren and Sanctuary must face the devastating environmental weapon Eden has unleashed while discovering the true extent of the settlement network that exists beyond Eden's control. Your support keeps this story alive. Eden of Ash, Chapter 5. Seeds of Dawn. Sanctuary's celebration was short-lived. As Eden forces retreated from the settlement's perimeter, a new alert sounded throughout the command center. Large-scale atmospheric disturbance detected approaching from the southwest, reported the environmental monitoring specialist, her voice tight with concern. Pattern matches artificially generated acid rain fronts we've observed during previous Eden containment operations. Scale is unprecedented. The holographic display shifted to show meteorological patterns. A massive weather system was approaching not natural precipitation, but artificially concentrated acid rain of far greater intensity than the caustic downpour that had preceded Eden's initial assault. They're implementing Scorched Earth Protocol. Major Chen interpreted her expression grim. Standard Eden approach when tactical objectives fail, attempt to render the entire region uninhabitable to prevent re-establishment of resistance presence. Ren studied the atmospheric composition data, her botanical training immediately identifying the chemical components Eden was using to generate the acid rain. The approach was ingenious in its terrible way, aerosol dispersal of specialized compounds that combined with existing atmospheric moisture to create self-sustaining precipitation patterns of extreme acidity. Evacuation assessment, Dr. Zhao asked. Partial evacuation possible via northwestern tunnels. Chen replied after consulting transportation coordinators. Sanctuary West vehicles can accommodate approximately 30% of our population. Remaining evacuation routes compromised by structural damage from Eden's assault. The impossible choice hung in the air. Which portion of their community could be evacuated? Which would remain to face what might be unsurvivable environmental conditions? Ren continued studying the atmospheric data. Something in the chemical composition triggering a connection in her mind, a relationship to the catalyst they had developed. The atmospheric manipulation compounds, she said, suddenly drawing everyone's attention. They're structurally related to the neurological control agent. Similar molecular backbone with modified active groups. Significance? Major Chen asked. Our catalyst might interact with them in similar ways. Ren explained, excitement building as she followed the molecular relationship to its logical conclusion. Not identical reaction paths, but potentially transformative effects on the acid-generating compounds. If we can distribute our catalyst into the approaching weather front, we might neutralize its destructive potential or even transform it into something beneficial. Distribution on that scale would require atmospheric deployment well beyond our settlement boundaries, Chen pointed out. We lack delivery systems with sufficient range and capacity. Commander Rivera of Sanctuary West, still connected via communication link, interjected, 3 of our transport units are equipped with high-altitude aerosol distribution systems designed for neutralizing smaller-scale Eden environmental attacks. Never tested against something of this magnitude, however. Can they be modified to distribute our catalytic compound? Ren asked. Theoretically, Rivera allowed, but effective distribution would require precise introduction at the leading edge of the weather system, where compound concentration is highest. Extremely high-risk operation given acid concentrations in the deployment zone. I'll go, Ren volunteered. I understand the catalyst chemistry better than anyone. I can make real-time adjustments to optimize interaction with the atmospheric compounds. Absolutely not, Dr. Zhao objected immediately. Your knowledge is irreplaceable. We cannot risk. My knowledge is precisely why I must go, Ren interrupted with respectful firmness. This isn't just about Sanctuary North's survival anymore. If we can demonstrate effective transformation of Eden's environmental weapons, we change the entire strategic balance between Eden and the Sanctuary network. Major Chen studied her with professional assessment. Botanist Kataev is correct from a tactical perspective. Her expertise provides the highest probability of successful catalyst deployment, but the risk remains exceptional. I'm aware of the risk, Ren acknowledged. But consider the alternative partial evacuation abandonment of Sanctuary North, loss of the specialized botanical knowledge and cultivation systems that make this settlement unique within your network. Sanctuary West will provide our best environmental protection gear and our most experienced atmospheric deployment specialist. Commander Rivera offered, if Botanist Kataev is willing to undertake this mission, we will maximize survival probability within operational constraints. Proceed with preparation. Dr. Zhao finally authorized, her voice heavy with the weight of the decision, but with all possible protective measures implemented. Sanctuary cannot afford to lose Katerina Kataev's daughter just as we found her. I'll return, Ren assured the elderly botanist, surprising herself with her conviction. My mother's work isn't complete yet. As preparations began for the atmospheric intervention mission, Ren returned briefly to the laboratory to oversee catalyst modification for wide-scale deployment. The molecular adjustments required were subtle but critical, optimizing for aerosol distribution and interaction with Eden's atmospheric compounds, rather than their neurological control agent. Elias joined her in the laboratory, his face showing minor injuries from the fighting, but his expression conveyed determined focus rather than exhaustion. The mission parameters have been established, he informed her. Sanctuary West's atmospheric intervention vehicle is being prepared with specialized shielding against extreme acid conditions. Estimated deployment time in 47 minutes. Interception of the storm front's leading edge approximately 30 kilometers southwest of our position. Will you be joining the mission? Ren asked. Yes, he confirmed. I've been assigned as your security specialist. Commander Rivera insisted on balanced representation from both settlements in the deployment team. Before they departed the laboratory, Dr. Zhao appeared carrying a data device, one of the cores recovered during the raid on Eden's Gardens. Before you depart, she said to Ren, there's something you should know. We completed preliminary analysis of the research data taken during the operation. Eden wasn't just developing neurological control compounds for the Havens. They were preparing for mass deployment across all their facilities, including the gardens themselves. Total suppression. Ren translated the implications clear. Not just controlling unrest, but preventing any possibility of independent thought or resistance even among their own scientific personnel. Yes, Dr. Zhao confirmed grimly. According to deployment timelines in their secure files, full implementation was scheduled to begin within the week. If the Remnant hadn't conducted the raid when they did, that's why they responded with such overwhelming force to the raid. Elias realized not just because of the stolen botanical materials, but because we interrupted a critical strategic operation years in planning. The confirmation of Eden's true intentions eliminated any lingering doubt Ren might have harbored about her choice. Eden wasn't preserving humanity until the world could heal. They were methodically stripping humanity of the very qualities that made restoration meaningful: independent thought, ethical judgment, the capacity to question and challenge. "We need to get this catalyst into the atmosphere," she said with renewed determination. "Not just to save Sanctuary North, but to demonstrate that Eden's weapons can be transformed against them, that adaptation overcomes control." Dr. Zhao embraced her briefly, an uncharacteristic display of emotion from the normally reserved scientist. "Your mother believed the path forward wasn't through imposing order on chaos, but through finding harmony within it," she said softly. "Show Eden the truth of that vision." With that philosophical charge and the practical necessity of their mission, Ren and Elias departed for the surface access point where Sanctuary West's atmospheric intervention vehicle waited. The specialized transport was unlike anything Ren had seen before, a hybrid of pre-collapse military technology and post-collapse adaptation designed for operation in environmental conditions that would destroy conventional vehicles within minutes. Commander Rivera met them at the access point. Her weathered features set in professional assessment as she briefed them on mission parameters. "The storm front's leading edge will reach these coordinates in approximately 45 minutes, she explained, displaying a meteorological projection on a portable tactical screen. "Our vehicle will intercept at this position where atmospheric modeling suggests optimal dispersal conditions for your catalyst. You'll have an approximately 6-minute window to deploy before acid concentrations exceed even our enhanced shielding capabilities." "Understood." Ren acknowledged, already mentally reviewing the dispersal calculations. The catalyst should begin interaction with the atmospheric compounds immediately upon contact with visible transformation effects within 2 to 3 minutes. If our models are accurate, and if they're not, Rivera asked directly, then we'll observe whatever actually happens and adjust deployment patterns accordingly. Ren replied with equal directness. "This is uncharted territory, Commander. We're applying theoretical chemistry against environmental weapons no one has successfully countered before." Rivera nodded, accepting the inherent uncertainty of their mission. "My atmospheric specialist, Captain Diaz, will handle technical operation of the dispersal systems. You'll provide guidance on catalyst parameters and deployment patterns." They boarded the atmospheric intervention vehicle, a massive, heavily armored transport with specialized environmental shielding and a complex dispersal system mounted on its roof. The interior was cramped but efficiently organized with monitoring stations for atmospheric conditions, vehicle systems, and dispersal equipment. Captain Diaz, a compact, intense woman, perhaps in her 30s, greeted them with professional courtesy before immediately engaging Ren in technical discussion about the catalyst properties and optimal dispersal patterns. "Theoretical models are valuable, but real-world deployment requires adaptive calibration," she explained as they reviewed the catalyst properties together. "I need to understand the fundamental interaction principles so I can adjust parameters during operation if conditions differ from projections." The vehicle departed Sanctuary North through a heavily reinforced access tunnel emerging onto the surface several kilometers from the settlement's main structure. Even with minimal exposure to the outside environment, Ren could see the approaching storm front on the horizon, a towering wall of dark clouds with the distinctive greenish-gray coloration of artificially concentrated acid rain. "Atmospheric sensors detecting increased acidity in ambient conditions," reported Captain Diaz. "Leading-edge effects already influencing regional chemistry. Estimated concentration at deployment zone. 72% above survival threshold. And increasing." The vehicle accelerated toward the interception coordinates, its specialized shielding already activating to protect against the deteriorating environmental conditions through reinforced viewports. Ren observed the landscape they traversed, rolling hills with the adaptive vegetation characteristic of post-collapse ecology plants that had evolved to survive in soil chemistry that would have killed their pre-collapse ancestors' life. adapting rather than surrendering to changed conditions. The fundamental principle Sanctuary embraced, and Eden rejected 5 minutes to interception point, announced the vehicle's driver. Atmospheric conditions deteriorating rapidly. Shield integrity at 97% and holding. What do you think our actual chances are? Elias asked quietly. Survival approximately 70% if we maintain discipline and nothing catastrophic occurs with the storm chemistry. Success. She paused, considering the complex variables involved, perhaps 50% for meaningful transformation of the storm front. Elias nodded. Better odds than Sanctuary North faced against Eden's assault before your catalyst intervention. Sometimes reasonable chances are the best we get. The vehicle slowed as it reached the calculated interception point, a high ridge that offered optimal position for dispersal into the approaching storm front's leading edge. Through the viewports, the wall of caustic precipitation loomed terrifyingly close, its unnatural color and density suggesting concentration far beyond anything that had occurred naturally since the collapse. Initiating deployment system. Diaz reported, activating the machinery mounted on the vehicle's roof. Catalyst loading sequence commenced. Botanist Kataev final confirmation on dispersal parameters. Ren reviewed the atmospheric data one last time, making minute adjustments to the deployment pattern based on the storm's actual composition. Increase vertical distribution by 12% from baseline. She instructed, concentrate delivery toward the upper atmospheric layers where compound density is highest. Catalyst reaction should cascade downward through the precipitation columns naturally. Deployment sequence activated, Diaz announced as the vehicle's roof mechanisms extended. Initial distribution in 3, 2, 1. A high-pitched whine filled the vehicle as the dispersal system activated, projecting the catalyst compound upward and outward in a carefully calculated pattern designed to maximize interaction with the approaching storm chemistry. On the monitoring screens, data streams showed the catalyst spreading through the air, reaching the storm front's leading edge and beginning to interact with Eden's atmospheric manipulation compounds. Initial chemical readings showing reaction cascade beginning, Diaz reported, acid neutralization occurring at point of contact, but she paused, frowning at unexpected data patterns. Interaction is generating significant thermal energy, more than your models projected. Ren examined the readings immediately, identifying the source of the discrepancy. Eden modified their atmospheric compounds with a secondary catalytic agent, something designed to accelerate acid formation in the presence of environmental moisture. It's interacting with our catalyst more energetically than anticipated. Dangerous? Elias asked immediately. Not dangerous in terms of explosive potential, Ren clarified after further analysis, but creating more rapid transformation than our models predicted. The energy release is actually accelerating the reaction cascade through the storm front. Indeed, visual observation through the viewports confirmed this assessment. Where the catalyst contacted the storm front, visible transformation was occurring, the unnatural greenish-gray coloration shifting toward a more neutral blue-white as chemical reactions neutralized the acid compounds. The reaction is propagating through the storm front faster than projected, Diaz noted with professional appreciation, atmospheric sensors showing rapid reduction in acid concentration throughout the dispersal zone. But something else was happening as well, something beyond the expected neutralization of Eden's acid-generating compounds. The energy released by the catalyst interaction was creating atmospheric disturbance patterns visible as swirling vortices within the transformed portions of the storm front, weather pattern modification. Diaz identified the phenomenon. The thermal energy release is altering air current dynamics, creating localized pressure differentials. The implications clicked into place in Ren's mind. Their catalyst wasn't just neutralizing Eden's environmental weapon, but fundamentally altering the artificial weather system they had created. The energy released by the chemical transformation was essentially hijacking Eden's weather modification technology, redirecting it toward different atmospheric outcomes. "Can we control it?" she asked Diaz. "Not precisely," Diaz replied after careful consideration of the rapidly evolving data. "But we can influence its development trajectory by modifying our catalyst distribution pattern. What outcome are you hoping for?" Ren studied the atmospheric readings, an idea forming based on her knowledge of post-collapse ecology. and the environmental challenges facing regions beyond sanctuaries' protected zones. The neutralized compounds contain significant nitrogen and phosphorus components, she noted. If we could transform them into a controlled precipitation pattern rather than the caustic downpour Eden intended. Plant nutrients, Elias realized immediately. You're trying to convert their destructive acid rain into beneficial precipitation for the surrounding ecosystem. Exactly, Ren confirmed. Eden wanted to render this region uninhabitable. What if we instead make it more fertile? Diaz considered this ambitious goal, her expression shifting from skepticism to calculated assessment as she studied the chemical composition of the transformed atmospheric compounds theoretically possible. She concluded, if we modify the catalyst distribution to concentrate in the upper portions of the cloud formation, we could potentially create a precipitation pattern with significantly altered chemical composition. Not perfect for plant life, but substantially beneficial compared to the original acid concentration. Do it. Ren decided recalibrate distribution to optimize for transformation rather than just neutralization. As Diaz implemented these adjustments, the storm front continued its visible transformation. The threatening wall of caustic precipitation evolving into something less ominous, but still powerful. The unnatural coloration faded further, shifting toward patterns more consistent with natural weather systems. Shield integrity at 89% and stabilizing. Reported the vehicle systems specialist, environmental acidity decreasing in proximal atmosphere. We've successfully countered the immediate threat to the vehicle. It's working better than we projected, Ren said, unable to keep a note of wonder from her voice. The catalyst isn't just neutralizing the acid compounds, it's completely restructuring the atmospheric chemistry. Eden created this storm to render the land barren, Elias observed. Instead, we're turning it into nourishment for new growth. The perfect metaphor for the difference between their philosophy and ours. The poetic observation captured something essential about their achievement. They hadn't just defended against Eden's weapon, they had transformed it into its opposite, converting destruction into creation through understanding and adaptation rather than mere resistance. Catalyst deployment complete, Diaz announced as the dispersal system completed its programmed sequence. 85% distribution achieved across the storm front's projected path, transformation reaction continuing through self-sustaining chemical cascade. Through the reinforced viewports, they could see the storm front continue its advance toward Sanctuary's position, but now transformed into something entirely different from Eden's intended environmental weapon. The clouds had lost their toxic coloration, and monitoring equipment confirmed dramatically reduced acid concentration throughout the precipitation pattern. We need to return to Sanctuary immediately, Ren said, studying the developing weather patterns. They need to be informed about the precipitation chemistry changes so they can prepare appropriately. The vehicle turned back toward Sanctuary North, moving at maximum safe speed through terrain now glistening with the first droplets of the transformed rainfall. Atmospheric sensors confirmed what visual observation suggested. The precipitation now carried significantly reduced acid content, along with elevated levels of compounds beneficial to plant growth. Sanctuary Command, this is Atmospheric Intervention Team, Diaz communicated through the vehicle's secure channel. Operation successful beyond projected parameters. Incoming precipitation has been neutralized and partially transformed. Acid concentrations reduced to 12% of original levels. Compound analysis shows elevated nitrogen and phosphorus content in precipitation. Pattern. Dr. Zhao's voice responded, her characteristic calm momentarily broken by clear astonishment. Confirmed intervention team, our sensors are showing the transformation. The storm's destructive potential has been neutralized. What you've accomplished is unprecedented. It was botanist Kataev's catalyst design that made it possible, Diaz replied, giving appropriate credit. The transformation reaction is continuing through the entire storm system, through self-propagating chemical cascade. Preliminary models suggest the altered precipitation will affect approximately 200 square kilometers of territory. As they returned to Sanctuary, Ren watched the transformed storm through the vehicle's viewports. Rain fell steadily over the landscape. But instead of the caustic destruction Eden had intended, this precipitation delivered compounds that would actually enhance the recovery of damaged soil chemistry throughout the region. Eden's weapon of devastation had been turned into a force for regeneration. The philosophical implications were profound. Eden had attempted to impose their control over the environment through destructive technology. But Sanctuary's approach to understanding natural systems and working with them rather than against them had ultimately proven more powerful. Adaptation had overcome control. Transformation had defeated destruction. They reached Sanctuary North's perimeter as the modified rainfall increased in intensity. Sanctuary West forces had established a defensive cordon around the settlement, their environmental protection technology ensuring safe movement despite the continuing precipitation. The cooperative action between the two settlements demonstrated the strength of the network. Eden had failed to detect or understand. Upon returning to the command center, Ren found it transformed from a crisis management hub into an assessment and recovery coordination facility. The holographic displays now showed real-time analysis of the transformed storm's effects, with environmental specialists documenting the changing chemistry throughout the region. The precipitation contains approximately 27% higher nitrogen content than natural rainfall from this region's historical records, reported an environmental scientist who had been analyzing the transformed storm. Phosphorus and potassium levels elevated by similar margins. Early soil samples from exposed areas are showing neutralization of acid buildup from previous years. This isn't just neutralized acid rain, it's effectively a region-wide fertilization event. Eden intended to create a dead zone. Dr. Zhao observed the irony evident in her tone. Instead, they've provided the catalyst quite literally for ecological restoration, beyond anything we could have implemented intentionally. Ren studied the molecular data from the ongoing precipitation, noting interactions she hadn't anticipated in their initial deployment models. The catalyst had indeed transformed Eden's acid-generating compounds, but the process had created tertiary reactions that continued to evolve as the modified rainfall interacted with soil chemistry and existing plant life. The transformation is continuing beyond atmospheric chemistry, she noted, highlighting specific molecular patterns in the data stream. As the modified precipitation interacts with soil compounds, it's creating additional beneficial reactions, breaking down accumulated toxins from previous acid rain events, releasing sequestered nutrients, potentially accelerating adaptive mutations in exposed plant species. Dr. Zhao leaned closer to examine these readings, her scientific mind immediately grasping the implications. This could dramatically accelerate ecological recovery throughout the affected region. What Eden intended as a finishing blow might instead become the most significant environmental restoration event since the collapse. Commander Rivera of Sanctuary West had joined them in the command center, having arrived with additional forces to secure the settlement against any renewed Eden assault. She studied the environmental data with professional assessment. Strategic implications extend beyond immediate ecological benefits, she noted. We've demonstrated that Eden's environmental weapons can be not just neutralized, but transformed against them. This fundamentally changes the balance of power between the Sanctuary network and Eden. They can no longer threaten settlement viability through environmental degradation, which means they'll adapt, Major Chen pointed out pragmatically. Eden won't abandon their strategic objectives simply because one approach has been neutralized. They'll develop new methodologies, new weapons, new control mechanisms. Of course they will, Dr. Zhao agreed. But adaptation is our strength, not theirs. Eden operates through rigid protocols and predetermined responses. When those fail, they simply apply more resources to the same approaches. We evolve constantly, developing new responses to changing threats. That's why Sanctuary has survived for 40 years, despite Eden's concentrated efforts to eliminate independent settlements. The philosophical distinction captured the fundamental difference between Eden and the Sanctuary network. Eden sought to impose unchanging order on a chaotic world. Sanctuary embraced change as the only meaningful response to disorder. Eden viewed the post-collapse environment as an enemy to be contained and eventually conquered. Sanctuary saw it as a transformed reality requiring human adaptation rather than domination. A settlement-wide communication alert sounded, but not the harsh warning tone of previous emergency notifications. This sound was different. A harmonic pattern that Ren would later learn signified positive developments of significant magnitude. Attention all Sanctuary residents, Dr. Zhao announced through the settlement-wide communication system. The environmental threat has been neutralized. The modified precipitation poses no danger to our structures or systems. Environmental shield systems can be returned to standard configuration. The storm Eden intended as a weapon has been transformed into a beneficial event through the successful deployment of a catalyst derived from Ren Kataev's research. She paused before adding, "Many contributed to this outcome, but special recognition must go to botanist Ren Kataev, who continued her mother's work and demonstrated that adaptation remains our greatest strength against those who would impose control through destruction." The acknowledgement caught Ren by surprise. Both the public recognition and the direct connection to her mother's legacy. She had acted primarily from scientific understanding and immediate necessity, but Dr. Zhao had placed her actions within the broader context of Sanctuary's philosophical approach to post-collapse survival. "There's something you should see," Dr. Zhao said to Ren privately after completing the settlement-wide announcement. "Something I think your mother would have wanted you to witness." She led Ren from the command center toward one of Sanctuary's upper levels, a section that had been damaged during Eden's assault but remained structurally sound. As they walked, they passed Sanctuary residents already engaged in repair and recovery operations, working with the coordinated efficiency of a community that had faced and overcome threats before they reached an observation area that provided a view of Sanctuary's surroundings through reinforced transparent panels. The transformed storm had reached its full intensity, rainfall cascading over the settlement's environmental shields and the surrounding landscape. But instead of the caustic destruction Eden had intended, the scene conveyed renewal water delivering life-supporting compounds to a damaged environment. "Look there," Dr. Zhao directed, pointing to a section of hillside visible through the precipitation. "The nightshade variants your mother planted before her death." Ren focused on the indicated area, at first seeing nothing but rain-slicked slopes with the hardy vegetation characteristic of post-collapse adaptation. Then, as her eyes adjusted, she noticed a pattern among the growth plants with distinctive purple-black foliage emerging from the background greenery, their structure unmistakably solanaceous despite adaptive modifications. "They've been dormant for years," Dr. Zhao explained, "growing slowly, surviving but not thriving due to soil acidity levels beyond their tolerance thresholds. Your mother planted them as an experiment in long-term adaptation, but conditions never reached the point where they could fully express their genetic potential." As they watched, something remarkable began to happen. The rainfall transformed by the catalyst from destructive acid to nurturing solution seemed to trigger an almost immediate response in the nightshade plants. Their leaves visibly straightened, reaching upward to capture the nutrient-rich moisture in a display of phototropism more dramatic than anything Ren had witnessed in botanical response patterns. Accelerated growth activation. She identified the phenomenon professional interest temporarily overriding emotional response. The modified precipitation is providing exactly the chemical triggers these plants have been waiting for. The timing between the catalyst transformation and their response suggests your mother designed these plants to activate specifically under these conditions. Dr. Zhao completed the thought, nightshades that would remain dormant until the right chemical triggers were present, then rapidly accelerate their growth and reproduction cycles. The implication was staggering. 15 years ago, Ren Kataev had not only developed countermeasures against Eden's control compounds, but had planted specially engineered botanical time capsules, plants programmed to remain in suspended animation until specific environmental conditions signaled the opportunity for expansion. She was thinking decades ahead. Ren realized the scope of her mother's vision becoming clear, not just defending against immediate threats, but planning for eventual ecological restoration when the right conditions emerged. Your mother understood that resistance wasn't just about surviving Eden's attacks, but about laying foundations for a future beyond their control, Dr. Zhao confirmed. These plants represent just one example of initiatives she established throughout the region, botanical systems designed to activate and spread when environmental conditions reached appropriate thresholds. As they continued watching the hillside, nightshades visibly expanded their growth patterns, leaves unfurling and stems extending with unusual rapidity. The plants weren't just receiving nourishment from the transformed rainfall. They were undergoing programmed activation in response to specific chemical triggers now present in their environment. What exactly are these plants? Ren asked, her scientific curiosity merging with personal connection to her mother's work. Beyond being nightshade variants, what function did she design them to serve? Soil detoxification specialists, Dr. Zhao replied. Their root systems are engineered to extract and neutralize heavy metal contaminants that accumulated in the soil after the collapse. As they grow, they'll gradually restore soil chemistry throughout their expansion range, creating conditions where other plant species can return to areas previously too toxic for growth. The elegant functionality of the design was characteristic of her mother's approach, not just addressing immediate problems, but creating systems that would continue working toward restoration long after the initial intervention. Not control, but guided adaptation, not imposition, but collaboration with natural processes. There are others, Dr. Zhao continued. Different plant systems designed for various restoration functions distributed throughout this region, and others where Sanctuary has established outreach operations. Some neutralize specific toxins, others rebuild soil structure. Still others provide habitat for returning insect species essential to pollination networks. Together they form an integrated approach to ecological restoration that works with natural processes rather than attempting to overwrite them. The scope of this long-term vision botanical systems planted years ago designed to activate when conditions permitted and work synergistically toward environmental restoration represented a fundamentally different approach than Eden's controlled preservation of selected species. Instead of maintaining carefully isolated specimens in artificial environments until the world could somehow be returned to pre-collapse conditions, Sanctuary had been quietly establishing adaptive systems that would transform the damaged environment from within. Eden's approach guarantees they'll never succeed. Ren observed the distinction crystallizing in her mind. By refusing to work with the changed world, by insisting on preserving unchanged biological systems until the environment can be forcibly returned to previous conditions, they've created an impossible goal. The world will never go back to what it was. Exactly. Dr. Zhao agreed. Your mother understood that adaptation is not surrender, but survival. That the path forward requires working with reality as it exists, not as we wish it remained. Eden preserves the past. Sanctuary builds the future. As they continued watching the nightshade plant's accelerated growth, a communication alert sounded from Dr. Zhao's personal device. She checked it briefly before turning back to Ren with renewed purpose. The council has convened an emergency session, she informed her. Representatives from Sanctuary West have proposed an unprecedented gathering of delegates from all 7 settlements in the network. They believe Eden's failed assault and our transformation of their environmental weapon represents a strategic turning point that requires coordinated response. All 7 settlements coming together? Ren questioned, immediately grasping the significance. I thought direct interaction was limited to prevent Eden from identifying the full network. It is under normal circumstances, Dr. Zhao confirmed, but these circumstances are far from normal. What you've accomplished with the catalyst technology, transforming Eden's weapons into tools for restoration, fundamentally changes our strategic position. The Council believes it's time for the network to consider more coordinated approaches to both defense and ecological restoration. The invitation was clear, though unstated. Ren's presence was requested at this historic council session, her expertise and perspective considered valuable to discussions that would shape the Sanctuary Network's future relationship with both Eden and the damaged world they all inhabited. They'll want to know if the catalyst approach can be replicated for other Eden weapons. Ren anticipated, her mind already analyzing possibilities. If the transformation principle can be applied beyond the specific compounds we encountered today, that, and more, Dr. Zhao agreed. Your mother's work continued through you represents exactly the kind of adaptive thinking the network was established to nurture and protect. The kind of approach Eden systematically eliminates because it cannot be predicted or controlled. The philosophical distinction between the two systems had never been clearer to Ren. Eden's approach, perfect control within artificial boundaries, versus Sanctuary's approach, constant adaptation to an evolving reality. Preservation versus transformation. Stasis versus growth. As they made their way to the council chamber where representatives from both Sanctuary North and West waited, Ren found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her here. Just days ago, she had been Eden's botanist Kataev, developing plant variants for what she believed were constructive purposes, living within a system whose fundamental premises she had never questioned. Now she stood as her mother's daughter and her work's inheritor, continuing a legacy of resistance through adaptation rather than control through preservation. The council chamber was filled with representatives from both settlements when they arrived, along with communication links to the other 5 sanctuary locations established throughout the former United States. The gathering represented the most significant coordination between independent settlements since the network's founding decades earlier, a direct response to both Eden's unprecedented assault and the unexpected effectiveness of Sanctuary's countermeasures. Botanist Kataev acknowledged the senior council member, a weather-faced man introduced as Elder Marcus from Sanctuary South. Your achievement today has created an opportunity unlike any in our network's history. For the first time, we have demonstrated that Eden's weapons can be not merely resisted, but transformed, a capability that fundamentally alters the balance between our communities and their controlled system. The catalyst technology derived from your mother's research and your own development represents an adaptive approach that Eden cannot easily counter. Added another council member, this one from Sanctuary East. They rely on controlled, predictable response patterns. Transformation of their weapons into beneficial environmental factors exists outside their strategic planning parameters. The significance of this strategic shift dominated the council's initial discussions. The recognition that demonstrating the ability to transform Eden's weapons rather than merely defend against them created uncertainty in their opponents' calculation models. Eden's entire approach to containing and eventually eliminating independent settlements relied on predictive certainty, the confidence that overwhelming force or environmental manipulation would achieve desired outcomes. By introducing transformation rather than mere resistance, Sanctuary had created a variable Eden could neither easily predict nor directly counter. Based on intercepted communications during their withdrawal, Eden forces have returned to their central complex to conduct comprehensive strategic reassessment, reported Commander Rivera of Sanctuary West. Their conventional assault and environmental weapon approaches having both failed, they will likely develop new methodologies for settlement neutralization, giving us time to strengthen our positions and expand transformation capabilities, noted a council member from Sanctuary Northwest. The catalyst technology should be shared among all settlements, adapted for each region's specific environmental challenges. The discussion turned technical as representatives from each settlement detailed their particular environmental challenges and defense capabilities. Sanctuary West specialized in atmospheric protection technologies. Sanctuary South had developed advanced water purification systems. Sanctuary East focused on energy independence through adaptive technologies. Each had evolved specialized approaches based on their specific regional conditions and available resources. What united them was the shared philosophy of adaptation rather than control, working with changed reality rather than attempting to impose pre-collapse parameters on a transformed world. Their differences represented strength through diversity rather than weakness through fragmentation, creating evolutionary resilience that Eden's standardized approach could not match. As the council's discussion continued, Ren found herself drawn to the molecular data still flowing from environmental monitoring throughout the region affected by the transformed storm. The catalyst reaction had continued evolving beyond their initial projections, creating tertiary effects as the modified precipitation interacted with soil chemistry and existing plant life. What had begun as a desperate defensive measure against Eden's environmental weapon was becoming something far more significant, a regional restoration event that might substantially accelerate ecological recovery throughout territories long considered irreparably damaged by post-collapse contamination. The catalyst approach could be modified for other environmental challenges beyond Eden's weapons. Ren suggested during a break in the council's deliberations. The transformation principle, using chemical triggers to convert harmful compounds into beneficial ones, has applications for toxic accumulation, heavy metal contamination, even radiation-affected zones. A shift from defense to restoration. Dr. Zhao elaborated immediately, grasping the broader implications. Not just protecting our settlements from Eden's attacks, but actively healing the damaged world beyond our boundaries. This perspective, moving beyond mere survival toward actual restoration, captured the council's attention. For decades, the Sanctuary Network had focused primarily on maintaining viable communities in a hostile world, while developing the knowledge and capabilities that Eden sought to suppress. The possibility of expanding their mission to include active environmental restoration represented a significant evolution in their collective purpose. Eden claims its purpose is preserving humanity until the world can be restored to pre-collapse conditions, noted Elder Marcus. Yet their actions consistently prioritize control over actual restoration. They maintain carefully isolated botanical and zoological specimens while taking no meaningful action to address environmental degradation beyond their walls. Because their true goal isn't restoration, but perpetuation of their authority, Commander Rivera observed. Actual environmental recovery would eliminate the justification for their controlled system. They need the world to remain hostile to maintain their narrative of necessity. The insight rang true to Ren, aligning with everything she had discovered about Eden's true purposes. Since her escape, Eden's leadership didn't want the world to heal. Not really. Their power depended on the continued perception that humanity could not survive without their controlled environments and carefully allocated resources. Which means environmental restoration represents not just a scientific goal, but a strategic one. She concluded, demonstrating viable recovery pathways undermines Eden's fundamental claim to authority, just as effectively as military resistance. This perspective, restoration as resistance, resonated throughout the Council. A new strategic approach began to coalesce, not abandoning defensive capabilities, but complementing them with accelerated environmental recovery initiatives that would simultaneously strengthen independent settlements and undermine Eden's justification narrative. We propose establishing a network-wide restoration initiative, Dr. Zhao formally suggested to the Council, coordinating our specialized knowledge areas toward regional environmental recovery using adapted catalyst technologies and activation systems similar to those Ren Kataev established in this region. With botanist Ren Kataev providing central coordination based on her expertise in transformation chemistry. The proposal received immediate support from representatives across all 7 settlements. Each community had developed specialized approaches to environmental challenges in their regions, but the catalyst transformation concept provided a unifying framework that could amplify their individual efforts into a coordinated restoration strategy. For Ren, the offered role represented both professional challenge and personal continuity, the opportunity to extend her mother's vision beyond its original scope, developing transformation technologies that could potentially accelerate ecological recovery across vast territories previously considered permanently lost to post-collapse contamination. I accept, she told the Council, her decision firm, despite the enormity of the proposed responsibility. But with one condition: the restoration initiative must include knowledge transfer to Eden's Haven populations. They deserve to know that the world isn't permanently dead beyond their walls, that adaptation and restoration are possible alternatives to perpetual controlled existence. The condition sparked intense discussion among Council members. Communicating directly with Haven populations represented significant risk. Eden maintained comprehensive information control within its territories, and previous attempts to share outside knowledge with Haven residents had been met with harsh suppression. The risk is substantial, acknowledged Elder Marcus after lengthy debate. But botanist Kataev's condition reflects an essential truth. Our purpose isn't merely to survive separately from Eden, but to ultimately free all of humanity from unnecessary control. If restoration technologies can create visible evidence of environmental recovery, visible even from Eden's walls, their narrative becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. The Council ultimately approved the condition, integrating knowledge dissemination strategies into the broader restoration initiative framework through careful information pathways, including sympathetic contacts within Eden's lower administration levels. They would share restoration methodologies and evidence of environmental recovery with Haven populations increasingly restless under Eden's tightening control. As the Council session concluded with formal establishment of the network-wide restoration initiative, Ren found herself standing once more at the observation area, overlooking the landscape where her mother's nightshade variants continued their accelerated growth. The transformed storm had passed, leaving behind soil chemistry dramatically altered from Eden's destructive intentions. The region glowed with subtle hints of new growth plant life, responding to the infusion of nutrients and the neutralization of acid accumulation with an almost eager intensity. Dr. Zhao joined her at the viewport, her expression reflecting both scientific satisfaction and deeper philosophical contentment. Your mother believed the future wouldn't be won through direct confrontation with Eden, but through demonstration of viable alternatives, she said quietly. Not just proving that humans could survive beyond their walls, but showing that the damaged world could heal through adaptive approaches rather than controlled preservation. Eden preserves, sanctuary transforms. Ren summarized the fundamental distinction that had crystallized through her experiences since escaping Eden's gardens. They maintain carefully isolated fragments of the past. We build new systems adapted to present reality. Precisely, Dr. Zhao agreed. And now, with the catalyst technology demonstrating transformation rather than mere defense, we've opened a new chapter in that philosophical divergence. Eden cannot easily counter an approach that turns their weapons into tools for restoration. The implications extended beyond immediate tactical considerations into fundamental questions about humanity's relationship with a damaged but evolving world. Eden's approach preserving unchanged biological systems within artificial environments until the world could somehow be returned to previous conditions versus Sanctuary's approach adapting both human systems and environmental interventions to work with changed reality rather than against it. "There's something I've been meaning to ask," Ren said after they had stood in companionable silence for several minutes. "My neural implant, the one Eden used to track me to Sanctuary, has it been completely neutralized?" Dr. Zhao's expression shifted subtly, suggesting this question touched on matters she had been reluctant to raise during Ren's tumultuous adjustment to life outside Eden. "The tracking functionality has been neutralized," she confirmed. "But the implant itself continues to function on an autonomous level, collecting neural activity data, though no longer transmitting it externally. Our technical specialists believe complete removal might risk damage to surrounding neural tissue, and it's still collecting data about what, primarily cognitive function patterns," Dr. Zhao explained carefully. "Particularly interesting are the changes our specialists have noted since your exposure to the catalyst, both the neural protection compound and its interaction with Eden's control agent during the defense of Sanctuary." The implication gradually clarified in Ren's mind. "My neural patterns are changing, like the enhanced cognitive effects we observed in defenders exposed to the catalyst transform control compound. Yes, though, with some unique characteristics," Dr. Zhao confirmed. "Your extended exposure to both compounds combined with your baseline neural architecture, which already displayed the characteristic patterns of anomalies that Eden considers dangerous, has created accelerated development in specific cognitive areas. Pattern recognition, creative problem solving, intuitive leaps between apparently unrelated concepts. The same cognitive functions the catalyst transformed compound enhanced in others," Ren noted, connecting the observation to their earlier findings, "but more pronounced due to prolonged exposure and baseline neural structure." "Precisely," Dr. Zhao agreed, "and potentially significant for understanding the broader implications of the catalyst technology beyond immediate defensive applications. If controlled exposure to the transformed compounds creates persistent enhancement of specific cognitive functions, the possibilities for accelerated human adaptation to post-collapse challenges expand considerably." The concept aligned with everything Ren had been discovering about her mother's research approach, not just addressing immediate problems, but establishing systems that would continue advancing recovery long after initial intervention. The cognitive enhancement effect wasn't an accidental side effect, but an intentional component of the transformation technology, enhancing human adaptive capabilities alongside environmental restoration. She designed it this way. Ren realized the elegant completeness of her mother's vision becoming clear, not just environmental restoration, but human cognitive evolution. Plants that adapt to changed conditions, and humans whose cognitive functions evolve to better address complex restoration challenges. Katerina understood that true recovery required evolution at all levels, Dr. Zhao confirmed. Environmental systems, botanical adaptation, and human cognitive development, all advancing together rather than in isolation. Eden's fundamental error is attempting to preserve unchanged human systems within unchanged environmental parameters, an approach that ignores the reality that adaptation, not preservation, is the foundation of survival. As they continued their discussion, moving from scientific specifics to broader philosophical implications, Ren felt a profound sense of connection to her mother's work, to Sanctuary's mission, and to a future defined by transformation rather than preservation. The path ahead would not be easy. Eden would develop new weapons, New control mechanisms, new approaches to eliminating the threat that independent settlements represented to their authority. But Sanctuary now possessed something Eden fundamentally lacked: the ability to transform opposition into opportunity, to convert destruction into creation. This adaptive resilience, embodied in both the Catalyst technology and the network's philosophical approach to post-collapse existence, represented an evolutionary advantage Eden's rigid control systems could not easily counter. As the transformed landscape beyond Sanctuary's walls responded to the Catalyst-modified rainfall, with visible signs of renewal, Ren Kataev, daughter of Katerina, inheritor of resistance through adaptation, architect of transformation rather than mere defense, contemplated the seeds of dawn now spreading through a world long shadowed by Eden's controlled darkness. Not Eden's perfect garden maintained unchanged behind walls of separation, but a world in process, damaged, but healing, altered, but alive, evolving rather than merely preserved. A world where adaptation, not control, would determine humanity's future relationship with both its environment and itself. In the ash of the old world, new growth had begun. Thank you for following Eden of Ash to its conclusion. If you enjoyed this dystopian exploration of environmental adaptation, human potential, and the philosophical tension between control and transformation, please like and subscribe for future stories. Your support makes these journeys possible.